Good evening, dear listener. As you settle in for the night, make yourself comfortable, let your shoulders drop, and allow your breath to slow whenever you're ready to drift off. I'll keep a quiet pace while we wander through simple moments of daily life long ago ordinary. Tasks, steady hands, and the small sounds that soothe the mind. There is nothing to remember and nothing to solve, only gentle scenes and unhurried work. Tonight, let's quietly explore for calm stories. First, we'll step into a Roman bakery before dawn, where grain becomes dough and the warm oven teaches patience. Then we'll move to the Nile's edge and watch linen brighten with natron under cool night air. After that, we'll sit within the soft warmth of an Ottoman hammock, following the quiet etiquette of steam, water, and rest. Finally, high on Andean terraces, we'll see how frost and sun help families turn small potatoes into long-lasting food. As you close your eyes, imagine lamplight, the hush of careful tools, and the rhythm of hands that know their work. The voice will remain slow and even. If thoughts wander, they can return at any time, so when you're ready, let's begin our quiet travel through the past and let these steady routines keep you company as you drift toward sleep. The bakery opens when the street is still a listener. A key lifts, a wooden bar slides, and the door answers with a low breath. Inside, the air holds the faint memory of yesterday's flour, oil, and smoke. The baker sets a small oil lamp on a shelf near the bench. Its wick finds a soft flame. Shadows take their places and stop moving. He stands for a moment with his palm on the work table. The wood is smooth where hands always meet it. The trough's long and shallow weight along the wall. A jar of salt sits by a folded cloth. Amphorae of oil rest in the corner on a bed of straw so their bases do not complain against stone. Sacks of grain lean in quiet triangles, tied at the neck with simple knots that remember how to undo themselves. Outside, hooves pass and fade. The lane is empty again. The baker lifts the first sack and eases grain into a sieve. He rocks it gently. A light tap-tap at the rim frees fine meal. The coarser pieces learn to wait their turn. The sieve makes a soft sand sound, regular and kind. From a small jar wrapped in cloth, he wakes yesterday's leaven-kept dough with a memory of ferment. He breaks it into small pieces, sets them in a bowl, and covers them while he turns to the mill. In the mill room, a circular stone sits under a larger twin with a funnel at its heart. The donkey walks the worn path, calm in the hour. A padded strap keeps the harness from scolding the shoulder. The mill begins its slow speech, stone over stone, grain becoming meal at a rate that invites breathing to copy it. The baker feeds the hopper by small handfuls, steady enough that no sharp hunger forms in the throat of the mill. He brushes the rim with a bundled twig so flour will not gather where it prefers to clump. Back at the bench, he weighs by feel. He knows this for his thirst. Warm water meets the bowl where the little pieces of old dough have softened. The scent is quiet and clean. He adds water by thin lines, not in a spill. A pinch of salt follows, a thread of oil, and then more flour and low rain. He draws the mixture together with the edge of his hand, then with the heel of his palm. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. The dough becomes itself first a loose thought, then a sentence that can hold its shape. He rests the dough in the trough under cloth dampened at the corner. A gentle aside belongs here. In many shops a piece of yesterday's dough is saved not as a superstition, but because it teaches today's mixture to wake more evenly. Levin remembers what worked. The oven asked for attention. It is a dome of brick with a low mouth and a floor that speaks in heat. The baker opens the ash door and draws out yesterday's tired, gray remains with a flat rake. He lays thin vine cuttings and small olive wood at the back, then thicker pieces on top. A spark from flint finds tinder. The flame answers without drama, grows to itself, and settles into the dome's curve. He watches brick turn from dull to warm to that color that bakers know without naming. Heat in a dome is a quiet agreement. It does not need numbers to be understood. While the fire builds, he returns to the trough. The dough has softened and rounded at the edges. He presses to fingers and the mark returns very slowly. He works it again. Press, fold, lift, and turn. The sound is a hush with weight in it. He divides the mass into measured pieces by the pressure of a palm and a short wooden scraper. Each portion becomes a round with a tighter skin. He cups the rounds and pulls them toward himself on the bench to teach their undersides to behave. They rest again under a cloth that does not cling. From a shelf he takes the stamped stone small carved seals with letters and marks. In a city with shared ovens and many hands, stamped loaves remember which household asked for them. He checks each face for crumbs and brushes them clean. A board dusted with fine flour waits for shaped dough. The oven's floor is now bright and the flame has grown modest. He pulls the fire to the sides with the rake and leaves a clean space in the center. A handful of flour tossed onto the floor browns in a measured count. Hot, but not hasty. The baker nods. He slides the first round from the board onto the peel, presses the stamp gently into the upper skin, and carries it to the mouth. The peel's edge kisses the floor, the loaf lies down and stops moving. One by one rounds find their place, spaced with a patience that knows expansion. He closes the mouth with a fitted door of wood faced with damp cloth. The cloth steams and keeps the door from complaining. The baker leans his back against the bench and listens. He speaks to dough in small words. The bell of the water jar in the corner pops once as the room warms. He counts by heartbeats and by the lamp's small drift. He will open the door, not to hurry, but to listen more closely. While he waits, he prepares for the next batch. More flour wakes in the bowl. Water finds it in thin lines again. A pinch of salt. The little jar of leaven offers another piece of yesterday's memory. He works without looking for perfection. The bench, the bowl, the trough, and his hands share the pace. The donkey pauses in the mill room and swishes a tail. The strap creaks once. The circle begins again. He opens the oven door a finger's width. A breath of heat touches his cheek. The loaves have lifted. The scored edges light lines made by thumb and string have widened into neat petals. The stamps sit clear in the crust. He allows them a little more time, then reaches for the peel. One loaf turns for a moment to even its color. Another stays as it is. Variety belongs to handmade bread the way rings belong to trees. A gentle aside, many Roman loaves were made to be broken by hand rather than sliced. Stamps and shallow cords were not decoration only. They offered places to part the bread without tearing its heart. When the first round comes out, he sets it on a slatted shelf so the crust does not lose its voice. The smell is warm and patient. He touches the base with a fingertip firm, not hard. He listens for the hollow note that says enough. The note is there. The oven door closes again, kind, not quick. The street will not wake for some time yet. Inside, the lamp keeps its cone of light. The dough for the second firing rests under its cloth, swelling the measured amount. Stamps are ready. Boards are dusted. The peel leans where it should. The donkey makes another quiet round. The bench holds its small hills of dough like quiet moons under cloth. When he lifts the first, its skin gives with a patient spring and returns without hurry. He rounds it again, palm-cupped, fingers guiding in, feels small pockets disappear as the surface learns to be smooth. A sprinkle of flour makes the board polite. He presses his thumb across the top to mark a shallow chord in 4 directions, not deep, only a suggestion of where steam may leave and hands may later divide. The stamp stones wait in a shallow bowl. One bears a simple marker ringer on a letter. Another carries a small palm branch. He lifts the ring stamp and breathes on it to make the flour let go. He presses slow and even until the face meets the dough's skin without pushing its shape aside. The mark seats cleanly, not heavy, not faint. The loaf keeps its roundness. The stamp sits like a name whispered at a door. He slides 4 rounds to the peel with the edge of a flat board. The peel's handle fits his hand the way a tool does when it belongs to a life. The oven has finished its small thinking. He draws the embers a finger width farther to the sides with the rake and sweeps the floor's center with a damp bundle of thyme twigs, just enough to take any ash that still hopes to travel. A breath of scent lifts and is gone. Loaves enter, one after another, a rhythm learned years ago from someone who stood where he stands. He does not crowd the floor. Heat moves around space better when it is offered. Door on cloth steaming, a weight of clay against the latch. He listens again, because listening at this work is quicker than watching. The lamplight does its small labor on the bench, and the little jar that holds salt keeps its shape against a gentle shadow. He returns to the second dough, which has softened into readiness. He folds it once for manners, once for strength, cuts it with the scraper into measured portions by habit rather than scales. Each piece rolls under his palms into a coil, then tucks into a round. He sets the rounds on a floured board, covering them with the cloth that has warmed the room. Proofing begins, time not measured by numbers, but by the way dough breathes. A gentle aside belongs here. In many shops there are loaves for different needs. Everyday rounds for households, harder biscuits for travel, baked longer so they keep. Small sweet loaves when honey is kind, or with olives when a harvest smiles. Here, tonight. The work is simple bread that remembers water, salt, and patience. He checks the oven. A small opening at the door lets a tongue of heat taste the air. With the peel he turns the first round a hand's breadth. The crust at the edge has just begun to color, closer to straw than chestnut. He lets them be. The time between turns is enough to return to the bench and move 3 more rounds to the stamping board. He takes the palm stamp now for 2 loaves ordered by a tavern that uses a palm on its sign. He presses gently, thinking of the boys who will carry these later, their fingers dusted to the cuticles, their steps sure on stones they have known since they were small. In the mill room, the donkey pauses and drinks. The bucket's iron handle gives one soft note when it meets the lip of the jar. The strap is checked, no chafing today. The donkey receives a slow stroke down the neck, a thank you that does not ask for reply. He sets the hopper to rest. There is enough fine meal for the next batch, and the R likes its quiet. Back at the oven, the first set leaves the floor for the slatted shelves. He listens at the bottom of each loaf with a knock that knows the right hollow. The crust sings a little as it cools, a string of tiny, friendly ticks. He stacks the rounds with space between, never smothering heat that needs to leave. The room grows warmer and smells of flour remembered as food. Proof rounds now show their readiness. A finger pressed to one returns slowly, not quick, not stubborn. He stamps, lifts, and stamps again. He rests each marked loaf on a board. Not to wait long only while the floor receives a fresh sweep, and the embers are adjusted at quarter hand toward the back. The second firing slides in and closes its door. Wicker trays come down from the high shelf ovals with flat centers and sides that suggest order. He checks their rims for broken canes and rewinds a loose end with a spare reed kept for these small repairs. A cloth lies in each tray. He dusts it with flour, which helps loaves sit without sticking and keeps their bottoms dry. The trays know the shapes of the rounds and will teach balance to young arms later. A gentle aside, in cities where ovens were shared or where fuel and space were tight, boys and women carried dough to the baker and bread home again. Stamps prevented confusion. Trays prevented drops. The path between stove and stairwell was as much a part of the bread as flour or fire. He shaped a small set of morning rolls from scraps and a piece of the softer dough rolling thin, then looping together. These bake quickly at the moth, where heat is gentler, and will go to the stall by the baths, where men taking first steam like a bite on their way out. The rolls smile open as if at a joke they tell only to each other. The second set is ready sooner than the first heat has found its stride. He turns to loaves for even color and lifts a third to test its base. The stamp sits proud without cracking, the cord lines open with grace. He lays each on the shelf and watches steam drift, less a cloud than a thought. He feels for weight proper, not heavy. The oven closes again, then rests open a courteous moment to smooth the floor's temperature before the next load enters. On a small stone slab he keeps a pot of oil and a sprig of rosemary. One loaf for the bath stall receives a whisper of oil on its top with the sprig drawn across, more scent than shine. A friendly signal to the seller who likes her loaves to look ready for company. He does not use much. Bread should still be bread. From a peg by the door he takes his counting cord. As loaves leave the oven and fine trays, he slides a knot along the cord for tens. It is a simple way. Easier to trust in this hour than a slate that asks for chalk and eyes. Later, coin will speak its own accounting. For now, knots mark the work's steady measure. Light outside has learned to be gray instead of black. A water seller pauses with skins that give a faint slap at his walk. The baker turns to the jar in the corner, pours a cup, and drinks without haste. He wets the cloth over the sleeping dough a little more with the last sip, and sets the cup upside down to dry. The room enjoys small courtesies. The boys arrive without knocking, which is the privilege of dawn help. One is taller this month. The other is new and watches first. They take trays by their opposite hands so weight shares correctly, and they stand with knees soft so the stones will not teach them a lesson. The baker lifts 2 rounds, places them with their stamps facing up and outward, and nods. Baths first, he says in the quiet voice of work. Then the stair at the wine cellar's lane third floor, the door with the chipped lintel. A gentle aside, roots repeat until they become part of a city's muscle. The same corners, the same steps, the same friendly shutters. The same dog that learns whose feet carried bread and decides to escort rather than object. The boys go and the room moves into the next rhythm, bench cleared of flour by a flat brush, trough wiped with a damp cloth laid smooth, so no crumbs learn to be hard. Stamps return to their bowl with faces up to dry. He checks the oven's bed once more and feeds a small piece of wood to the side embers. He enjoys this moment between where first work has landed and second work prepares to lift. The first trays have gone out, and the room takes a breath that belongs only to this hour when heat has found its balance, and tasks line themselves without asking. The oven door rests open the width of a thumb, letting the dome think before the next load. The bench is brushed, the trough cloth is smooth, and the counting cord shows to tidy knots that promise coin but do not hurry it. Outside, shutters begin their morning language, one lifted, one slid, one propped with a stick that remembers its part. A broom somewhere learns the rhythm of a step and stone. The fountain in the nearby square speaks in its own small syllables. The lane smells mostly of cool air with a new warmth that says bread is near. 3 neighbors arrive with bowls wrapped in cloth and tied with string. In streets like these, bringing one's own dough to a bakery is both economy and custom. Heat is expensive, space is small, a good oven is a shared friend. The first neighbor, a widow from the second stair, sets her bowl on the bench and aunties it with hands that have made the same knot for years. Her dough is pale and soft. She nods toward the palm stamp and smiles, as if borrowing luck. The baker checks by touch fingers, remembering rather than judging, and adds a pinch of flour to keep the skin from sticking to the board. He presses her household stamp to circles and a dot and grants her a quiet place at the next firing. She will wait, as people who cook with shared heat always learn to do. The second arrives with a heavier mix, barley cut with wheat, meant for a week that may be longer than intended. The baker marks it with the family's letter, blocks off a modest patch near the oven mouth where heat is kinder, and notes to bake it a little longer. A gentle aside belongs here. Flour blends travel through a city the way news does, by taste and by need. Barley keeps, wheat pleases. A sack's content is a paragraph about a household's calendar. The third neighbor is a tavern boy with dough sweetened by a spoon of honey and touched with anise. His master wants small rounds stamped with a cup symbol and baked just enough to split for filling. The baker rolls the portions thinner, presses the cup stamp lightly so it will not crack the top, and sets them aside for the last space in the current floor. These will be ready when workers begin their first errands and look for something that can be eaten standing up. He sweeps the oven floor with the damp thyme bundle again, a small scent to remind Ash that it is not today's guest. The embers nestle to the sides like cats finding corners. The new loaves slide in each given room to remember its shape. The door closes. The cloth at its face releases one soft hiss. He leans on the bench and listens for the moment when heat and dough begin their quiet conversation. It is a sound more felt than heard, the change in a room when a task begins without complaint. From the mill room, the donkey gives a small breath as if answering. The baker feeds a cautious measure of grain and lets the stones turn for a shorter round, enough to keep flour ready without accumulating a boredom of powder that steals air. The strap is checked again. The animal's ear flicks at a fly that the owl forgot to send away. The baker rubs the spot where a collar might chafe on a less careful day and returns. The boys come back with empty trays that tell stories in flour. The taller has learned to carry with his wrist rather than his shoulder. The younger has found the rhythm of steps that match a tray's swing. They place the boards on pegs along the wall where drying happens like advice taken the first time. One tray has a reed end that loosened. The baker winds it tight and shows the smaller boy the simple knot that turns a tale into a habit. The boy nods intensely, as apprentices do, storing the knot somewhere under the ear. The oven answers when asked. He opens the door 2 fingers wide and reads color edges turning from straw to bread's own brown, tops swelling along their cords, stamps sitting clear. The widow's loaves want a moment more. The tavern discs at the mouth smile open and leave early to finish on the slats where air rounds them to tender. The barley blend holds like a promise. It will carry a household to the week's market. He slides the palm-stamped rounds onto a tray lined with cloth, places the honey anise discs in a neat row, and signals the taller boy for the tavern's delivery. Back for the square, he says, and then the cloth sellers stare. The boy nods, balances, and goes. The smaller boy receives the widow's 2 loaves with ceremony and a reminder, stamps up, so the door watcher will know whose they were if someone asks. The boy carries them across the lane where a cat yields space to bread without resentment. Another aside. In a shared oven street, a door watcher may be an old man on a stool or a girl with a spindle. Either can remember who passed and with what stamp. Memory. Here is a civic tool. More quiet requests arrive. A midwife asks for soft rolls for a house where a child will be born. The baker shapes them with less pressure, lets them rise a little longer, and bakes them near the door so their crust stays tender. He places them wrapped in cloth. The midwife tips her head and leaves without many words, which is also a custom. A fishmonger's boy brings a note for barley rounds to carry salt fish later. The baker moves them to a place in the oven where they will firm without becoming stubborn. A scribe from the corner stall wants slender sticks of Dograsini's simple ancestors dried near the oven's mouth for nibbling while ink dries. The baker rolls them under his fingers into patient rods, flicks flour away so it will not burn bitter, and sets them to bake in the steady warmth that teaches crispness without harshness. The city now speaks in full senses. Wheels pass with that measured iron hush. A vendor calls figs in a tone meant for ears still waking. Somewhere a door disputes its hinge and loses. The fountain keeps its rhythm. The bakery breathes along with it. Never rushing to match the street, never ignoring it either. He checks the counting cord, another knot slid, and a small one added for the special orders. He takes a moment to drink from the jar. Cool play gives the hand back its temperature. He pours a little over the cloth that covers the remaining dough. The cloth sips at the edges and learns damp again, a kindness against skin. A woman stops at the door, breath bright from walking, and asks if there is a small round for her child who likes crust. He finds one that finished while he looked away and hands it to her wrapped in a shred of clean linen torn from an old proofing cloth. She presses a coin into his palm and the faintest thanks into the air. Business here is not a conversation. It is a nod with bread in the middle. He turns back to the oven for the barley loaves. Their bases thump with a deep note. He sets them on the slats and pulls one palm stamped round a heartbeat sooner for a customer who prefers pale. Preferences. like stamps, are maps of the neighborhood. On the bench, the bowl with leaven receives a small piece torn from the newest dough and is covered again to sleep into tomorrow. The trough is wiped from end to end with a cloth that, by now, knows exactly how to leave a surface barely damp. The mill's stones stop. The donkey, released, noses the strap as if making sure it will be where it belongs next time. The baker hangs it on its peg and gives the animal a last stripe of water with his palm. Heat has learned the room, and the room has learned heat. What remains is a graceful landing, last trays for neighbors who came late but not too late, a few special shapes for market stalls, and the small arithmetic of coin against knots. The oven door stands open a thumb, then two. The dome's breath is steady like a kettle that knows not to insist. A potter's boy appears with an apologetic bowl of dough that rose more quickly than planned. The baker presses the surface down with a gentle hand and reshapes the portions so the skins tighten again. Overproof dough will act as if it forgot its posture. Reshaping reminds it kindly. He stamps the pieces with the potter's wheel, mark a neat circle inside a larger ring, and sets them by the door where heat is thoughtful rather than eager. A gentle aside belongs here. Last firings are the hour for dough that needed more time to decide. Earlier, the oven's hunger is for regular rounds. Later, it asks for patience and small favors, flatbreads, thin sticks, and shy loaves that arrive near the end of confidence. The tavern discs, now cooled to tenderness, leave with the taller boy who has learned to balance on the small slopes of the lane. The younger returns with the widow's empty basket, a coin wrapped in cloth at the bottom. He offers it with the ceremony that baskets deserve. The baker nods and sets coin on a shallow tray, not in a purse. Coin prefers air first, then leather. He checks the counting cord and slides one knot down to meet the others in a tidy family of three. For the special orders, he adds short knots between, easy to read with fingers when the light moves away. At the end of work, cord will meet coin and the ledger will meet both, but not yet. Bread first, arithmetic second. This order keeps peace between ovens and minds. He clears a narrow space on the bench for flatbread, simple dough pressed with fingers to make a field of small dimples, drizzled with a breath of oil and a pinch of herb. The dimples do more than decorate. They keep pockets of air from licensing blisters that try to run. The rounds slip in at the mouth and come back out almost as quickly, edges curled, centers sighing. A cloth receives them and softens the snap. Two pieces travel to the bath stall, where steam meets salt and makes friends. Back inside, the donkey receives a small reward, two fingers of barley grain rubbed with the last sweetness from a jar that once held figs. The animal's patient eye registers the treat without asking for a story to go with it. The strap is checked the last time and hung square. Stones cool at their own rate, which is to say with a dignity that makes a shop more thoughtful. He returns to the oven and sweeps the floor lightly with the damp thyme bundle, not to clean now but to draw the last evenness from the heat. Embers at the sides are spread in a thin crescent. The door is set ajar with a small wedge so the dome keeps its conversation without drifting to sulk or scorch. The baker knows, by the way the brick color has stepped down a shade, that only one substantial firing remains. He sorts it with care, one tray for the potter's boy, one for the cloth seller, one for whoever walks in surprised but hopeful. Neighbors drift by the doorway to look without crowding. In a street with shared ovens, shelves are as informative as town gossip. What remains tells the hour better than a water clock. A handful of rounds, a row of crisp sticks, a soft roll or two meant for a sick room. The baker answers, looks with nods, his chin traveling the inventory in a language older than signs. The potter's loaves go in light pressure with the peel, quick but not careless. He closes the door, sets the clay weight, and leans his back against the bench. This is the moment he lets his shoulders make something like a decision to drop. He pours water into a bowl and rinses his hands, rubbing flour from knuckles and under nails with a twist of linen that long ago stopped being new. The bowl's rim leaves a ring of cool on the bench where it sat. Cohen begins to behave. The taller boy returns with a small purse that sags correctly. He empties it into the shallow tray. Copper first, then the brighter pieces, then the few thick ones that change breathing for a moment, and then give it back. The baker matches coins to knots, moving each to a corner of the tray where families of amount gather under their own elders. When he reaches a special order, he lifts the short knot and touches the coin meant for it. If there is a difference, he makes a tiny mark with charcoal on a scrap and puts it under the stone NIOU to himself and to no one else. A gentle aside, ledger keeping in a small shop is not grand. It is marks that can be read on a day when eyes are tired and memory feels kind but not precise. Lines and dots, small words, and a way of writing that looks like it belongs to the work. He checks the oven. The potter's rounds have taken color. Their stamps sit true. He turns to for the sake of evenness, and brings one out a breath sooner, for a neighbor who likes a softer shell. He lines them on the slats with the generous spacing that keeps crusts honest while steam leaves. The room smells of bread rather than heat, now an important shift in a baker's house. With the last full baking done, he begins the soft closing of tools. Stamps are wiped with a dry cloth, then touched with a thumb of oil so flour remembers not to settle in the cuts. The scraper is rinsed and set to dry on its edge, not face down, so it will not learn laziness. The sieve is thumped gently on the heel of a hand to remind fine flour that its work ended an hour ago. The trough cloth is carried to the jar and run, then hung from a peg, corners squared, small tiddinesses that teach cloth how to be ready. He tends the oven's temper, as one tends a lamp at the end of reading. Coals are raked into two even beds at the sides and lifted, a few at a time, into a bronze pan that will live near the doorway to give slow warmth to the threshold. The floor receives a wider sweep with a fresh, clean bundle. The scent of thyme rises and falls like a bold note. He leaves a single stick of olive wood near the door to keep the Doan from thinking it has been forgotten too abruptly. Doans, like people, prefer transitions that explain themselves. The boys fetch brooms with wide straw mouths and learn the path of sweeping out from the bench in long lines to the door, crumbs lifted rather than chased. Crumbs are not waste here. They find tomorrow in small ways thickening for a stew, crust for a fish cellar, or feed scattered under a henhouse. The bin receives only what cannot learn to be useful. He opens the jar that keeps the leaven, pinches a breath of flour over its surface, and presses the lid down lightly. It does not need prison. It needs shade and a quiet corner. He writes a tiny note on the crock's shoulder with charcoal, fed, and the day's sign the boys can read. It is a promise exchanged between this hour and the one after midnight. The last customers arrive in pairs, and singles, few words, more gestures. A man with plaster on his sleeves takes 2 rounds and a flatbread. He gives thanks without untying his hair. A girl from the scribe's nook buys 3 crisp sticks and cradles them like reeds. An older man counts out coins slowly. The baker matches his pace and adds a small roll to the cloth without mentioning it. Kindness in shops is better when it is not a story. When the shelf shows only enough for the house and the market stall, the baker lets the door stand wider. Air travels in at a lower temperature and speaks to the bricks in a voice that says afternoon will come whether or not we discuss it. He turns the counting cord around his hand and ties a loose loop, then sets it beside the ledger. He sits for the first time on a low stool and drinks water that has grown warmer by waiting. The boys settle on their heels and watch the dust in the window column. The donkey sighs. The oven holds its shape in the room like a quiet elder who is pleased with the day and unwilling to say so. The room now carries the kind of warmth that does not ask for new work. The oven's mouth is a soft rectangle. The bricks keep a memory of flame but have agreed to be calm. The shelves offer a few rounds for the house and the market stall, set apart by a fold in the cloth. The boys lean the broom heads upside down so their straw will not learn a splay, then wait for the last small tasks that teach a shop to sleep well. The ledger comes to the bench like a quiet guest. Its cover is rubbed smooth where a thumb always opens it. The baker turns to a page that has learned to receive only clear words. He writes the date with a careful hand, then records the knots as families of numbers 3 tens and a 5, special orders noted with a small mark that looks like a bird's foot. He lists the widow by her stare and the tavern by its sign, the midwife with no name because work like hers is better carried by privacy than by ink. Copper and bright coins go into their bags, each purse tied with a knot that reads to his fingers later without a lamp. A gentle aside belongs here. In places where accounts live close to the work, clarity is a kindness to the future self. Ink dries with a normal mind in it later. A tired mind can read without guessing. He lifts a board to shake flour into the bin where offcuts and crumbs already wait for tomorrow's uses. The bin's lid closes with a small wooden whisper. He wipes the bench with a damp cloth that travels in long, even sentences out from the ledger's place, across the grain, and down the sides where flour likes to hide. The cloth is rinsed, wrung with the twist that does not strain wrists, and hung by 2 corners to dry without learning creases that will argue later. The donkey shifts in the mill room and takes a contented mouthful from the small ration left as a thank you. The strap is coiled by habit into a circle that sits flat. The stones, cool enough to ignore company, keep their stillness. The boys pause at the threshold of the mill and then come back, as if checking that the room's quiet is the right kind. At the door, air changes by degrees. Morning has moved into the square without asking permission. The fountain keeps its syllables. The fig seller has found her voice. A cart stops and starts. A wheel tests a rut and decides to go around it. From somewhere, a launderer laughs once, short and good-natured, the sound of water making a joke out of splashing a hen. Bread carries these sounds well. They settle among crust and cloth and become part of the day's record. The market bundle is tied. 2 rounds, the crisp sticks, and a single flat bread slip into a shallow basket lined with a clean scrap. The taller boy takes it with the calm he has been learning. The smaller boy receives a folded cloth for the stall's board and a coin for errands later. They leave with a step that keeps baskets level and greetings brief, returning the door to a rectangle without people. The baker checks the oven's temper one last time. He lifts a pan of quiet coals and sets it by the threshold to teach the draught a lesson in manners. The floor inside receives a final stroke with a fresh damp bundle, not to change heat now but to make a good end. He props the door with a chip of wood shaved thin enough to look like a smile. The dome will ease down through afternoon into the kind of evening that keeps a shop from waking too soon. He turns to the small jar of leaven and listens without needing ears. He lifts the lid, breathes in the faint, fruity scent with its almost sour edge, and presses the surface with a fingertip. It springs a little and rests again. He adds a dusting of flour, a spoon of water, and the last pinch torn from the morning's dough, then stirs with a stick dedicated to this jar alone. The lid sits lightly, a cloth covers both. On the crock's shoulder he adds a brief mark to line so the boys will know when they open tomorrow how the jar slept. The stamps return to their drawer face up, a habit that keeps edges from forgetting their sharpness. The peel leans against the wall at the correct angle so its blade does not learn to warp. The sieve sits in its hoop with no flour at its rim. The pot of oil is corked. The sprig of rosemary, now faint and tired, is thanked and set aside for the breezy aroma as farewell. Coin moves from tray to purse with a measured sound. Each bag receives only what it understands. Copper in one, bright in another. The thick pieces many days' worth tied in a third and hidden where the wall knows to keep secrets. The ledger receives a single, satisfied dot at the bottom of the page. In this house, a dot means enough. The broom takes its final path, guided by the smaller boy, who now knows to lift crumbs at the threshold rather than chase them into the lane. The dustpan, a shallow scoop of old wood, receives the day's small evidence. Not much remains, just proof that hands have been working rather than proof that they were careless. A woman arrives with a message on a scrap. Tomorrow, one round for the stonemason at the bridge early. The baker pins the slip under a small stone near the door where the dawn I will find it. Promises stored in plain sight are harder to forget than promises hidden where memory must work to do its job. He steps outside and pulls the shutter down to its resting place, leaving the door open the width of a palm until the boys return from the stall. The lane smells of bread resting and of clay warming in the sun. The cat that earlier surrendered to bread has found the shade under cart. Across the way the widow lifts one of her stamped loaves and presses it lightly with her thumb, checking for the sound that makes soup eager. The boys come back with the emptied basket and the cloth folded right-sided. They report without a speech. The stall is set, the cloth is flat, the sticks are arranged like small rails, and the fig seller has promised to watch the place while they bring the next tray at mid-morning. The baker nods and gives them a slice each from a loaf that cracked at the edge, not flawed, just gifted with a reason to become a snack. They eat standing, the way people do inside work that still has a little breath left in it. He closes the door to its latch. The shutter rests. He dims the lamp to its last coin of light, and then teaches the wick to forget flame. The room's shapes stay where they are: oven, bench, trough, jar, sieve, peel, ledger. Tools know how to wait when they have been put away with straight corners. He ties his apron to its peg, wipes his hands on a cloth that will join the wash later, and stands for a moment with his palm on the bench where the day began. A gentle aside. Endings done slowly make better beginnings. An oven taught to cool, a ledger clear, a jar fed, and a floor swept. The body learns the same habits and takes them to sleep. He lifts the market basket for the next delivery, checks the knot on the purse by touch, and opens the door with the kind of care that looks like laziness but is actually respect. The lane accepts him. Moonlight lines the stones. The bakery, behind him, breathes in the way rooms do when their objects are content. And as we leave the warm hush of the oven, let's follow the sound of water to a quieter edge of history where linen meets river, natron brightens cloth, and night air finishes what careful hands begin. The river keeps a voice that belongs to night, soft against reeds, sure against stone, neither secret nor loud. Along its bank a small procession arrives without hurry, two women with baskets, a boy with a jar on his shoulder, and a donkey whose step knows where the ground remembers to be level. The baskets smell of dry palm fiber. Inside them, linen lies folded in modest stacks, tunics worn light by heat, headcloths that caught the day's dust, narrow belts, a sheet or two with the faint crease of sleep still in them. They set their things under a tamarisk where the moon has left a pale coin of shade. No lamps tonight, the sky is enough. The older woman loosens the cord around a small linen bag and pours a bright powder into a shallow bowl. Natron mineral salt gathered from dry places that remember ancient lakes. A thin stream of river water meets it, and the powder sighs into solution. The scent is clean and cavern cool, not perfume, not sharp, only a kind of clarity. She stirs with a reed, and the liquid settles to stillness like a thought ready to be useful. A gentle aside. This is not soap as we know it. It is simple and good. Natron lifts oils and light dirt, teaches cloth to release what it learned during the day, and leaves no noise in the weave. They work without speeches. The younger woman kneels on a smooth slab that has been chosen over many seasons for being level and kind. She lays a tunic on the stone, pours a hand of natron water over it, and presses with her palms. Not beating, not scratching, just a quiet persuasion that sends water through linen, and linen back through water. The boy brings more clean water in a jar shaped to the shoulder. He keeps it capped with a wet cloth and stands up current where the river's line keeps itself honest. Downstream, farther away, someone's line of clay pots takes a bath of their own before tomorrow's bread. Upstream, beyond sight, drinking water is fetched. Each thing has a place so that everything can happen without argument. The donkey lowers his head and finds the sweet grass that grows where feet have not worn the bank into hardness. He carries a second jar whose only job is to receive used natron water when it has done its work. Later the liquid will be poured carefully into a strip of sand that tongue of river does not always reach. There is a manner to this work that respects the water. You will meet again tomorrow. The young woman hums under her breath. The sound keeps time with her hands press. Lift, pull the cloth along the stone, turn, press again. The linen darkens evenly as it drinks, then pales in places where water leaves. The older woman takes a paddle flat wood worn smooth on both faces and taps, not to punish the fabric but to help the grains of dust loosen from between threads. Tap, turn, tap. The sound is a heartbeat's cousin. They work by order. First the light cloths that once sat against skin. Then the tunics that saw the street. Last the pieces that met a longer day, aprons with grindstone flour along the hem, a cloth that cushioned a jar at a shoulder, a belt that carried the memory of a field. They do not mix these tasks, because linen listens and keeps memories if you ask it to. When a piece has shared enough of its day with water, The two women lift it, face each other across a small distance, and twist in opposite directions. The movement is slow and sure, so the fibers will not protest. Water falls back to the bowl in a soft rope. The cloth becomes lighter without becoming wrung to anger. The boy brings a reed mat and lays it in the moon's open square. One by one, rinsed pieces find this dry bed. The air cools them. Night keeps insects asleep. The world minds its volume. A gentle aside, whitening is not only a matter of scrub. It is also the sun's work, and sometimes the moon's. Linen laid damp at night and lifted at first light learns a brightness that feels like air has stayed to live in it. Later, the sun finishes the sentence. The older woman takes a small jar from the basket, opens it, and releases a fragrance that is barely their oil touched with a leaf from a courtyard plant. Not lavish, just a human kindness that says clean may also be pleasant. A few drops meet the rinse water for the head cloths, and the jar closes as if nothing happened. The boy's work is the carrying of rivers. He refills from the current with a dip, learned to make jars quick and light again, caps with the wet cloth so splashes become rare events, and sets each jar in a place where a foot will not find it by surprise. He learns without being told the rule of quiet at night. Stones rolled back to their original chairs, reeds passed through rather than pushed, voices kept at the level where owls do not feel the need to leave. A breeze travels along the surface of the water, and the reed mat answers by lifting a corner. The older woman weighs it with a rounded stone whose only job is to be agreeable. She checks a tunic by laying her cheek to it, not for warmth, but for a kind of scent that says the work is not done or is done well. The linen replies with neutrality and a faint cool. Good. Farther down the bank, two sisters do the same work but with different tools, a hollowed log half filled with river water, a handful of clean sand to polish cuffs and hems. Their hands make the quiet circle of washing inside the log, then carry the cloth to the river's edge to let clearer water finish the thought. Different ways, same gentleness. The river does not mind the variety. They pause for a sip from the jar set aside for drinking. The water has a comfortable weight. The boy wipes the rim with his cloth before passing it on. The donkey lifts his head and looks toward the sound of someone's late laughter on the far bank. Then he returns to grass and the science of standing. Cloth by cloth, the mat feels. When it is time, they lift its four corners and carry it to a flat, clean stretch of earth where the night can finish one kind of drying and dawn can begin another. They flit each piece once to teach it to lie without wrinkling itself into trouble. A belt is rolled around a smooth reed so it will remember straightness. A headcloth is shaken and folded in half to avoid creases that would argue with a braid in the morning. The bowl of natron water has grown cloudy with success. The older woman pours it into the waiting jar, corks it with a wad of reed, and sets it away from the clean work. The rinse water, by contrast, meets the river again in a careful pour that does not bully the bank. The slab is rubbed with a handful of wet sand to make its surface kind for the next time. The paddle is rinsed and leaned against the tree with its back to the trunk so it will not learn to warp. Upstream, the sky grows a seam of color so thin it is not yet a color. The reed beds shift in small phrases. Somewhere, a bird remembers one note and tries it. The river answers by continuing. The edge of night loosens slowly as if a seam were being unpicked by a careful hand. A cool band of color appears above the reeds, more feeling than hue, and the river becomes less secret. Mist does not gather here, the air prefers clarity. Even so, the ground keeps last night's cool, lending it to bare ankles and quiet tools. They greet the light by rinsing again. The boy pours a thin thread from the jar over the slab. The older woman slides a tunic through that moving stripe so fresh water speaks the last word. She uses her palm, flat and steady, to send water along the fabric's weave. The younger woman turns the cloth, letting each edge drink and release. They do not rush. Rushing teaches wrinkles to grow opinions. Instead, they let fold lines relax and hens find their calm. A gentle aside, the last rinse is not about strength, it is about patience. Linen prefers to forget your hands before it meets the sun. Water, gently persuaded, does that forgetting on your behalf. They lift the reed mat from its night place and carry it to a patch the sun will claim fully. The ground there has a slight slope of kindness that keeps damp from standing still. Piece by piece, the women lay linen flat, smoothing from the center out as if removing air with a wooden spoon. A headcloth is opened wide, edges aligned to the world like a map set straight. Tunics are placed face down first because seams like to relax while the sun introduces itself. Belts lie long and narrow, taught to remember straightness. The boy sets rounded stones on the corners where the morning breeze rehearses being wind. Across the water, someone calls a ferryman by name, not loudly, simply as if finishing a sentence started yesterday. A paddle answers with a hollow tap. Birds try a few notes and, finding them sufficient, stop again. The donkey chews methodically, ears pointing wherever the next thought will come from. Natron has done its clean work. Now the sun begins its bright work. The light arrives not in a sheet, but in slow, polite steps. First it meets the reed fringe, then the edges of linen, then the broad fields of cloth. Where damp sits, the white cools toward brightness. Where almost dry, the surface takes on a quiet mat. The older woman tests with the back of her hand the tender skin, then with her cheek, but judge stricter than fingers. She does not look for heat, she listens for the moment when cool goes from water to air. The boy brings a small bowl with water touched by a drop of oil. The older woman dips to fingers and draws a faint line along the fold of a tunic's collar, not for scent now, but to teach the collar to lie without arguing with the throat later. The younger woman pinches a hem between thumb and forefinger and runs along it with a gentle pull. Stitches settle into a line that says thank you without words. Farther along the bank, another pair of washers hang to narrow cloths over a rope between tamarisk branches, then gently tug the rope to encourage even drying. Here are to prefer ground drying today. Dust is quiet, breezes are modest, and the sun sits where it can mind many pieces at once. Different choices. Saying good manners toward cloth and air. They step lightly among the laid pieces, feet careful to place only on ground, never on linen. The younger woman checks for small visitors' reed seeds, a blade of grass, a single insect that decided to take a brief sea voyage and can be persuaded otherwise. She lifts each gently on a damp fingertip to relocate it respectfully. The boy trails behind to move the corner stones when breeze tells him to. A gentle aside, whitening is a partnership. Natron removes what is not linen. Sun changes what remains of the day into what looks like light itself. Neither scolds. Both require unhurried minutes. As the sun climbs a finger width, they begin to turn pieces. Linen that lay face down now shows its other side to the sky. The motion is practiced. Lift to corners, roll to the other edges. One might roll a scroll, then unroll, letting air slide under, not folded. A soft shake completes the turn. The cloth answers by settling flatter than before. A tunic's panel receives a flat palm pressed from shoulder to hem, a motion that feels like writing one long word. There is time within this time for small repairs. From the basket, the older woman takes a needle stuck through the corner of a folded scrap, and a length of fine thread waxed with a breath of oil. She finds a loose stitch at a side seam, and carks it with tidy, even bites, knots hidden inside the seam's fold. The younger woman trims a pulled thread at a cuff with a shard of smooth putter used only for this. Its edge speaks a cleaner language than a knife here. The boy, having delivered fresh water to those downriver who asked politely, with a lifted hand, returns and lowers a jar next to the donkey, whose consideration of the jar is brief but approving. He takes a moment to trace a simple pattern in damp sand with a read the curve of the river as seen from here, two dots for mats, a line for the path home. The reed draws, then rests. Sand accepts and forgets with equal grace. By now the first pieces are nearly dry. The older woman tests a tunic by lifting it at the shoulder and letting it hang. It falls straight, no hidden damp in the hem. Good. She lays it on a smooth board and draws a polished river stone across the surface with long, even passes. This is pressing more than shining. The weight teaches the fibers to behave. The stone is not heavy, the patience is. Seams learn to lie, panels learn to keep the flat kindness that makes dressing feel like cooperation. A gentle aside, irons with coals are not companions of this hour or place. Here, the press is the palm, the stone, the board, and the insistence of smooth motions repeated without hurry. They fold each piece along its friendly lines. Tunics in thirds, then halves, headcloths corner to corner, then rolled belts coiled with a finger in the center to keep the circle honest. Each folded article returns to the basket in the order the day will ask for it. Working tunics at the top, finer ones under cloth, household cloths to one side. A small scrap, not yet used or mended, lives in the basket to cushion a pot slip on the walk home. Voices gather upstream, sellers naming figs, bread, and dates in tones that feel like blessings rather than noise. A fish seller pauses with a crate that smells of river farther from shore. He glances at the neat rows of linen and softens his step, as if loud footfalls might crease cloth at a distance. Courtesy spreads by example. The donkey steps closer as the baskets grow lighter and receives a touch on the neck that says his patience has been seen. The boy slips the strap into the familiar place that never rubs and checks the knot with 2 fingers. The donkey sets his feet wide before the baskets are lifted, making a working table of his back for a respectful moment. He waits for the small word that releases him to ordinary walking. They return to the river's skin to rinse hands and splash wrists, using only what belongs to the body. Tools get their own water. The slab is wiped, the paddle leaned, the mat shaken from the corners before being rolled around its own axis, the polite way to carry reeds that have served you well. The cloudy jar of used natron water is carried to the sandy strip that drinks and holds liquid sinks without troubling the river with yesterday's work. The sun has learned to be day. Shadows shrink into the feet of trees. Linen in the baskets carries a new weight, the agreeable kind that belongs to clean and dry. The women lift, The boy walks ahead to look for stones that might prefer not to be stepped on, and the donkey takes his share of the load as if loads were simply another kind of silence to keep. Streets widen as they step away from the river, trading reed scent for the warm hush of courtyards. The donkey's hooves know the shallow slope of the lane. The boy walks ahead, moving aside a pebble here, a twig there, keeping the path polite for baskets that deserve an easy return. At the doorway the lintel gives a tiny creak of recognition. Doors in places like this remember the weight of morning. Inside the courtyard, shade waits in the right corners. A square of light lies on packed earth that has learned smoothness from brooms and the daily kindness of a little water. A low jar sits near the wall, sealed with a wet cloth to keep its temper. A flat board rests onto bricks. Another board of the same size leans nearby. Two rounded stones, neither proud nor heavy, just steady weight for their task. They set the baskets on the board and open them without flourish. Linen has its own quiet theater as folds undo themselves. The older woman takes a tunic and holds it up by the shoulders, letting it recall its shape. She lays it on the board, smooths from neck to hem with the flat of her hand, then lifts the second board and places it on top, corner aligned to corner. The stones take their places on the far edges, not to crush but to teach patience. Wait here is a teacher who speaks slowly. A gentle aside. In houses without heated irons, boards and steady pressure do much of the pressing. Some households add warmth from sun-warmed wood or a flat stone that has held early light. Others rely on time. In all cases, the important part is unhurried, even touch. The younger woman turns to the rinse water jars the boy carried carefully. One holds the last clean thread from the river, another holds water that has met linen, and now is ready for simpler work. She tips a ladle from the second jar across the courtyard floor. Packed earth darkens kindly, and dust decides to stay put. She wets the broom and draws long, slow puffs from walls toward the center, lifting any witness of feet. The little wetness left in the ladle wakes the herb pots along the edge: basil, a leaf for scent, a small plant with silvery fuzz that drinks sparingly. The edible pots wait for fresh water later. The used rinse goes to the earth that mines the air. The boy kneels at the washing threshold with a shallow basin. He pours a bit of the clearer water and rinses the reed mat corner by corner, lifting out fine grains of sand that wish to travel. He leans the mat to dry against the sunny wall, reeds smiling into place. The paddle receives a similar kindness. Its flat face is wiped with a damp cloth and set to rest away from heat so wood will not learn to bend. Tools that have worked at night enjoy the courtesy of morning. From a small jar, the older woman takes a pinch of fine powder ground grain whisked with water into a thin paste yesterday and dried to ease storage. She stirs a spoon of this into a cup of warm water until it clears to softness and makes a faint gloss between finger and thumb. Not a stiffness, just a suggestion. She brushes a breath of it along the edges of a collar and the ends of cuffs. When dry, those places will remember straightness without turning sharp. Nearby, the boards sit with their small stones and do their quiet arithmetic. The younger woman lifts the top board, peers at the tunic underneath, and trades it for another, so time will distribute itself fairly. She uses a polished river stone, the same she carried in a basket pocket, to glide across a headcloth, long passes from center to edge. The stone is smooth enough to press without clinging, cool enough not to wake steam, weighty enough to persuade. The cloth listens by lying down flatter than before. A gentle aside. Some households add a breath of fragrance while pressing crushed leaves brushed lightly along seams or a drop of scented water touched to a corner. It keeps the nose company later when the day grows warm. And it tells the hands that folded the cloth that their care has a voice. The boy brings the jar sealed at the river and sets it near the boards. The older woman moistens a cloth, wrings it until it holds only the idea of water, and passes it once over a tunic surface. Not to wet, only to invite the fibers to accept the stone's counsel. The stone follows, the board returns, the stone's nest on top. The process is more rhythm than step. Lift, look, smooth, press, rest, trade. By the courtyard wall, a low cord stretches between two pegs. The younger woman hangs a belt for a few breaths, more for alignment than drying, then coils it around 3 fingers, and slides the coil off to sit in the basket like a small, obedient wheel. Head cloths fold corner to corner, then into narrow bands that will unwind easily without teaching creases to argue later with hair. With the clearer rinse water, the boy wipes the threshold and the lower edge of the gate where dust likes to settle. He dips a small cloth and cleans the rim of the big storage jar so that when fresh water arrives it meets a polite lip. He carries the last of the river clear water to an inside basin for hands that will prepare midday bread only a little, enough to remember the river while eating. The older woman leans a shoulder against shade for a breath and watches the stones doing their work. Pressing with boards is quiet company, nothing to animate, much to complete. She lifts, checks, and folds. Tunics stack with shoulder to shoulder and hem to hem, head cloths lie light, narrow towels roll, and nest in the corner of the basket so they will unfurl friendly. Between some layers she slips a dried leaf, not as perfume, but as a small conversation between cloth and cupboard. A gentle aside, storage is part of cleanliness, shelves kept dry by a finger's width of air, folds arranged to avoid tight corners, and baskets aired in sun from time to time keep fabric ready. In busy houses, even the way stacks alternate collar to hen. Hen to collar helps columns stand straight. They pause for a drink of cool water drawn from the sealed jar. The boy tips the cup, wipes the rim, and hands it along. A small plate with yesterday's flatbread and a dab of paste herbs and oil arrives to the board. They eat standing, as people inside useful minutes tend to do, and let conversations stay in the shapes of work. The donkey noses a basket and receives a scratch along the jaw for his curiosity and labor. The last of the used rinse water finds the courtyard in a final, polite pour. The floor darkens in a wide oval that dries as silently as it appeared. Brooms hang on their pegs with bristles upward. Like hair arranged for a portrait, the mat gleams, newly tidy. The paddle waits without yearning. The folded linen returns to the household chest, a low wooden box with a lid that closes flush, and a smell of clean wood. The younger woman lifts the lid carefully. Inside, a thin layer of woven reed lies on the bottom to keep air moving where wood meets cloth. Tunics stacked first, then head cloths, then towels. The chest receives a small wedge so the lid rests almost closed. A finger of air is a good friend to fresh cloth. Later, when the day bends toward evening, the lid will settle fully. The stones leave the boards and return to their corner. The boards stand side by side, edges aligned. The older woman rinses the pressing stone, dries it on her apron, and slips it into the basket pocket where it always waits. She folds the emptied baskets within each other, reed inside reed, until one neat stack remains. A breeze passes through the doorway, finds no dust to carry, and leaves satisfied. The courtyard smells of linen that met water, and then light, of damp earth becoming not damp, of a plant touched by a drop of oil. Time has gone wide and slow. The courtyard has settled into the kind of quiet that invites small work. Sun leans across one wall, shade keeps a cool square near the doorway. The chest stands open a finger width, linen breathing softly inside. This is the hour for mending gentle, seated tasks that sharpen cloth rather than scold it. The older woman brings a low stool and a woven basket that holds her quiet tools, a bone needle smooth from years of fingers, a slimmer copper needle for fine seams, a tiny pot with a breath of wax, and a roll of thread wound on a sliver of reed. The younger woman spreads a folded tunic on her lap and follows the line of a side seam with her thumb. Near the hem, a single stitch has slipped. She draws the copper needle through a short length of thread, touches the thread's end to the wax so it will travel without arguing, and begins to take even, shallow bites along the seam. The needle moves in, then out, listening to the fabric's weave. The knot hides itself neatly in the seam allowance. The cloth accepts the correction and lies down as if it had always been that way. A gentle aside, when thread comes from the same cloth pulled from the interior of a hem or a spare corner, mending becomes near invisible. Color agrees with color. Texture speaks its own language back to itself. The boy sits on the threshold with a basket of scraps, useful pieces kept from garments that finished their lives as rags. He sorts by feel more than by size, softer for patches near skin, firmer for cuffs and elbows, a narrow strip with a strong selve for a place that needs a straight edge. He finds a cuff from an old child's tunic and holds it up with a question in his eyes. The older woman smiles and sets it aside for a later patch. Cuffs make obedient patches for other cuffs. The boy resumes his sorting, stacking little squares like quiet tiles. The younger woman discovers a thinning place under an arm. Not a hole yet, only the suggestion of one to come. She chooses a thread a shade deeper than the cloth and begins a tiny lattice darning that lays down a new path where the weave has grown tired. Her stitches are short and regular, running with the grain, and then across it, never pulling tight enough to pucker, never loose enough to wander. The patch stays inside the fabric's thickness rather than proud on top. When she lifts her needle, the worn place has earned a new strength without looking louder than the rest. Beside her, the older woman takes up a headcloth and marks its corner with a household sign, a small lozenge shape made of 4 straight stitches and one tiny knot at the center. This is not ornament for display, it is a label that makes washing, folding, and lending easy. Each house in the lane has its own simple mark, a dot inside a ring, 2 short lines, a leaf, a little ladder. Marks live where eyes and hands will always find them, on a corner that lies to the right when folded, on the inside of a hem, beside a seam that meets a shoulder. The sign says, "Bring me back," more politely than a name would. A gentle aside, when garments share a communal wash, marks become memory, the token on a corner, the count of cords on a sleeve, or a band of colored thread tucked into a hem lets a piece find home without dispute. Thread is cheaper than misunderstanding. The boy carries over the basket of scraps and offers a small square with edges already turned under. The older woman nods. A tunic used for grinding days has worn thin where it meets the hip. She places the square inside the garment, aligns its threads with the tunic's weave, and baste stitches the edges so they lie calm. Then she overcasts slowly from the outside, catching a few threads of each layer at a time so the seam becomes part of the cloth rather than a ridge. She pauses to smooth with the flat of her nail, teaching the patch to behave without words. When she is done, she runs her fingers inside, no roughness, no snag. The hip will remember this kindness when the stone's grit returns. On the board by the wall, the younger woman sets 3 tunics side by side and knots a tiny thread at each color to mark size: 1 knot for the smallest, 2 for the middle, 3 for the largest. The knots sit inside, near the shoulder, where only the hands that dress will see them. In a chest where white looks like white, such knots are a calendar and a map. The boy brings the jar with the day's remaining rinse water, the clearer portion. There is enough for water's last test before the sun climbs high. In the corner of the courtyard, the clay around the well lip has begun to show a hairline crack. The older woman mixes a small cup of thin slip from clean clay and the last of the rinse. She stirs with a broken reed until it glosses like cream. With 2 fingers, she smooths the slip into the crack, pressing gently so clay meets clay and remembers to be whole. The cup receives a little more slip to seal the lid of a storage jar where grain rests from dust. Water that worked once at the river works again at home, lighter in duty but not less useful. A gentle aside, gray water, when kept clean of harsh things, often travels through a house as helper, settling dust on a floor, quieting a courtyard, waking a plant that can drink a little salt, or marrying clay to clay where a seam needs peace. Respect for water is not one act. It is a chain of small, well-placed ones. The younger woman threads a short, bright strand dyed with a plant kept in a pot near the door and hides 3 tiny stitches inside the hem of a child's tunic. The color is not meant to be seen. It is a sign to her future self that this garment belongs to the 3rd stair room, middle chest. When chests grow crowded and mornings quick, such secrets simplify the day. The donkey dozes, shifting weight from one foreleg to the other, letting a fly know that this is not its hour. The boy rubs a soft spot between the animal's eyes and then takes up a narrow strip of leather. He checks the basket harness for a place that might soon think of fraying and adds a small reinforcing wrap, stitching through pre-made holes with a blunt awl and patience. Harness that is kept whole makes work quiet for everyone. On her lap, the older woman lays out a narrow towel whose edge has curled. She dips her fingertip in the thin sizing saved from earlier small cup with enough for justice and strokes the towel's long side. She lays the towel under the board, places the second board above, and weights the far edge with a single stone. While the boards teach straightness, she turns to her needle again. Near the doorway, the boy arranges the mending basket, needles nested in a folded scrap, threads wrapped snug on reed slivers, the wax spot closed, scissors of bronze slipped into their cloth sleeve. He sets the basket on a shelf, out of direct sun where tools will not learn heat. The courtyard seems to nod everything in its place, nothing crowing for attention. They finish with a small inventory. The younger woman lifts each folded piece from the chest, checks its corner mark, and counts softly. Tunics for work today on top, finer ones lower, protected from reach by habit. Headcloths ready by the doorway where hands pause before errands. Towels that will visit the basin placed near the lip for easy taking. belts coiled like quiet moons against one side. The lid rests half closed again, learning to be patient until full shade returns. Water's last task is given to the threshold. The boy sprinkles the remaining clear sips across the entry, then draws the wet broom in one thoughtful pass to settle any invisible dust. The cool spreads and then disappears, leaving a freshness that is more felt than seen. The jar is inverted to dry, mouth down, so rims will stay clean. They sit for a brief moment with hands folded, watching the boards finish their lesson. The courtyard holds a stillness that is not empty. It is the fullness of tasks that have reached their proper size and then stopped. By late morning the courtyard has the kind of light that shows edges without asking them to be sharp. The boards have finished their lesson. When the older woman lifts the top plank, the tunic beneath lies flatter than thought, seems obedient, and straight. She folds along the lines that hands and body will follow later, smoothing once with the side of her palm so the fold remembers kindness and not command. The chest waits with its lid resting a finger width ajar, as if listening. Tunics return first, those for work nearer the top, finer cloth below, a protecting cloth. Head coverings arrive in even stacks, corners all pointing the same way so the hand finds them without the eye. Towels roll and nest like quiet shells to one side. Belts coil to the other, each given its small space so leather or woven reed will not learn to kink. The household sign stitched at a corner becomes a row of tiny stars when the stacks are seen together, a map the chest will keep for days. A gentle aside, order at rest is not only for beauty. When mornings grow quick or evenings grow tired, neat stacks keep tempers gentle. The chest does small work for the people who will open it. The boy pads the board with a folded cloth and brings the last head covering for its press. The older woman draws the polishing stone once, then twice, feeling the fabric soften under pressure that is more patient than heavy. The cloth lies down with a faint, agreeable hush. She folds it and palms a breath of smoothness along the edge, then lets it join its folded kin. Now linen goes back to bodies. The younger woman takes a tunic for the boy, one with two knots set inside the collar, middle size. He lifts his arms and the cloth slides on like a cold word. She ties a belt at his waist and straightens the shoulder so it sits without twisting. The boy smiles at the chest in a way that is mostly for himself. Clean feels like the beginning of a day even when the day is already happening. The older woman binds up her hair with a head cloth that remembers being taught to lie smooth. She crosses the ends at the nape and brings them forward, the motion learned so long ago that the cloth moves into place without advice. She smooths the edge at her temple with one finger and tucks it, the way one tucks a thought to keep it. A neighbor peeks at the doorway with a respectful half-step inside the threshold. She carries a basket with two pieces marked by their household sign, a pair of short lines like reeds. They were washed on the far bank last night and turned this morning where the wind was kinder. She has come to compare signs and sizes to be sure the right cloth finds the right chest. The older woman greets her, and they hold up pieces, mark to mark, corner to corner. Threads agree, stitches speak the same language. They trade with a small laugh that lives under their breath, and a line that says, "Next time the rope will hang higher." Neighbors share rivers, as well as roads. The donkey rests by the wall, head lowered, one hoof set lightly to say he is ready to move when asked but is not being asked yet. The boy rubs the soft place above the animal's nose. Thanks spoken by palm rather than mouth. A scrap of dried reed becomes a brief toy that the donkey investigates with solemn interest, then ignores, which is also a game. Water continues its little tour. The jar that held the clearest rinse has a last swallow left. The younger woman uses it to moisten the broom before a final, almost ceremonial pass along the courtyard center. Dust that thought of lifting decides to remain seated. The broom's straw speaks softly against the earth in long, even lines. The jar is inverted again, mouth down to dry so the next filling will meet a clean rin. At the well lip, the thin slip applied earlier has set to a new skin. The older woman strokes the repaired place with the side of her thumb. Smooth. The seam has taken the lesson, clay to clay, water to water. She touches the storage jar lid where a fine line of slip sealed the day and nods once to herself. Small repairs prevent loud ones later. From inside the house comes the sound of a bowl set down, a wooden spoon testing dough that began as an idea earlier this morning. Hands that know linen also know grain. Routines sit beside each other and do not compete. The boy carries the polished stone back to its pocket in the basket, a familiar little home. The basket swallows it without complaint. They close the chest properly now. The lid lowers, then stops as if to think, then settles with the softest fit. No creak. A palm rests on the wood for a breath. A gesture as much for the person as for the box. The chest has work still guarding dryness, lending faint scent to the air, but it will do that work without supervision. A gentle aside, in hot lands clean is also cool. Linen that met water and air returns a little of the night to the skin, even at midday. That is why this fiber has been friend for so long, because it holds the sky's manners. They sit for a short while in the shade, not because nothing remains to do, but because pauses are part of keeping the rest of the day kind. The older woman rubs a thread of oil between thumb and forefinger and touches the chest's lid, not to shine it, only to remember that hands are the polish of most things here. The younger woman counts the knots again in her mind, the sizes, the places, then lets the counting go. The boy listens to a bee try the bloom of a basil plant and then change its plan. Outside, the lane has become noon. Footsteps are deliberate. The fig seller's voice lowers to a tone that says shade is worth finding far off. The river is not seen but is understood. It keeps its width and its promise without needing to be checked. Tonight it will wait again with its stone and reeds and its arrangement with people who meet it gently. The older woman stands and lifts the empty mat from the wall. She rolls it from one end to the other so the reeds learn to keep a memory of the mornings they just had. She ties it with a strip of soft fiber and sets it where the mat lives. The paddle leans beside it, faces in, safe from sun. The pressing boards stand shoulder to shoulder, their edges aligning because people have asked them to. At the threshold, the boy sprinkles a palm of clean sand and smooths it with the side of his foot. The child's quiet signature that wind will erase and the door will enjoy for an hour. The donkey flicks his ears and steps toward the cooler corner, where a scrap of shadow is becoming shade. The younger woman straightens the latch and rests it. The courtyard knows where everything is. The chest knows what it holds. The day knows how to go on. If your breathing has followed these last, ordinary gestures, fold, place, close, sit, stand, and continue, let it stay slow. Linen has returned to bodies, shelves have regained their balance. And the river has kept its calm promise for another night's work. And as we leave this quiet house for a while, we can step into a different kind of water indoors, under domes of pale stone where steam drifts like a thin veil, where low voices keep courtesy, and where warm marble teaches the body to loosen, the gentle etiquette of an old bathhouse. Before the day chooses a color, a low door in the bathhouse wall slides its bolt with a sound soft enough to leave the street asleep. Inside, cool air rests under a dome held up by patient arches. A lantern finds its gentle circle on marble that has kept hands and feet for so long it remembers where to shine. Far off, water speaks in the way of basin slight, regular, undecided whether to be heard or only felt. In the furnace room, a stoker feeds the fire that lives behind the baths. Wood stacked carefully yesterday becomes this morning's heat, pushed along a brick throat so flames do their work out of sight. The great copper kettles above accept warmth slowly. One keeps water nearly simmering, another holds it cooler. Between them runs a channel that can mix the two into any kindness a bowl might ask. A small door opens to the outside, just enough to invite new air. The fire thanks it without fuss. A gentle aside, in houses like this, heat and water are married before dawn. The person who tends that marriage often has no other job name. It is a profession of timing, never hurry, never neglect. Keep the kettles thoughtful, the stones honest, and the steam at the level that teaches bodies how to loosen. An attendant sweeps the entrance hall, the cool room where street dust first decides to stop traveling. The broom's straw learns the curve of marble at the base of the wall. Benches along the sides receive folded cloths, pextemal towels made of thin cotton with narrow stripes that read as quiet punctuation. Above the benches, niches hold bowls of coppertus, each one with a handle shaped to sit in the palm without argument. Sandals of wooden slats and leather straps wait in pairs under a low shelf, arranged heel to wall, toes facing the door as if to point the way. From a chest comes the bath's small library of scents: olive oil soap, plain and sure, another bar washed with laurel, a bottle with a memory of rose, a little jar where mastic hides. These are not loud. They are a kind of courtesy the air extends to the skin. The attendant lifts the lid of the soap jar, breathes once to be sure time has not stolen it, then sets it by the warm doorway where scent will travel without insisting. The first trickle of steam slides from the inner arch as heat reaches the big room, the haret. The central platform, the gibek tawi, a wide marble belly of stone raised a little from the floor, has begun its patient warming. Round it, small alcoves hold basins set into the walls, each with two taps shaped like flowers or stars. One tap will pour from the hot kettle, another from the cool between them. Any river you like can be made in a bowl. Signs that mean remember yourself exist without letters. A hook near the door waits for shoes. A low stool beside the bench suggests sitting to wrap the pextemal so modesty can travel comfortably. A stack of sandals remembers to clack softly on stone so no one steps barefoot where soap might wander. The bath teaches the rules by arranging objects in ways the body recognizes before the mind writes them down. The door watcher comes with a small tray. On it sit cups for tea that will arrive later, a few tokens for accounting, and a pencil stub for the ledger. She opens the ledger to a page that holds only lines and the date. Names will be written as they are spoken, or marks added when a visitor simply nods. Cawing will meet the marks at the end when skin is pink and time has softened. The first guest is always early and never hurried. He leaves shoes on the threshold, puts on wooden sandals, and ties a peckstemel easily around the hips. The attendant greets him with the same volume the steam prefers. A copper bowl is handed over, warm already from a ledge that rests near a pipe. The gesture says, "Take your time." A gentle aside. Etiquette here is a list written in actions. Speak low. Pour water away from feet, never onto them. Sit on the stone as if it were an elder. No thump, no sprawl. Rinse your bowl before you share a basin. If you like someone to scrub your back, ask with the bowl tilted like an offering and a small word. If you prefer to work alone, keep the bowl close and the soap quiet. The bath accepts both answers. Inside the warm room, the guest sits first on the step between air and heat. This is the middle place, where the body decides to leave the street and join the bath. Breath learns to be longer. The peckstemel grows heavier very slightly as air greets damp. When ready, he walks to a basin. Hot and cold taps are opened a heartbeat, then closed a brief conversation with temperature. The bowl fills from both in turn until the water reads as comfortable. He lifts it and pours from shoulder to shoulder. Warmth writes a line across the skin that the rest of the body will follow. An attendant for scrubbing the telic arrives with a mitt of coarse weave, the keys. He does not begin without a nod. He motions to the gebek tari. The stone is warm through, not burning, like a long-held hand. The guest lies face down first. The peckstemel can stay if modesty wants it. The mitt can work on it. The telic pours a bowl of water that arrives not as a shock but as a persuasion. The mitt begins at the shoulders and travels in long, patient paths toward the hands, then down the back in lanes that do not hurry. The sound is a whisper of cloth on salt. Nearby, a second basin receives a small performance of foam. The telic whisks soap with a netted bag and a little water until a mountain of bubbles forms the size of a cat, then larger. He lifts the foam with practiced scoops and lays it like snow across arms and back. Foam keeps warmth where it is needed and makes the mitt's second round more like polishing than scouring. Nothing sharp happens. The bath is about persuading the day's dry habits to loosen. Another guest, an older man, sits in an alcove and pours steadily bowl to shoulder, bowl to knee, counting softly to the number he prefers for readiness. Count rituals vary. Some choose 7, some 10, some simply wait for the thought, now. He watches the steam climb the wall and return as a bead of water that runs like a slow ant to the floor's shallow channels. These channels lead toward a drain that hums like a satisfied kettle. Floors slope by intention so puddles do not become conversations. A gentle aside, stone, water, and time are the bath's 3 instruments. The human additions soap, cloth, mitt, oil are the chorus under them. When all work together, the room becomes a way to mark the week that has nothing to do with markets or courts. When the telic invites the guest to turn, he supports a shoulder with a forearm so movement is quiet. The mitt writes new lines, light across ribs, circling calves. Pausing at palms where a whole day's worth of grip has collected, a bowl rinses foam. Then another to say truly finished. The peckstemel meets the body again, clean now. Heavier with agreement. In the cool room, a second attendant lays a dry towel across a bench. Tea arrives amber in a small glass, hot enough to notice, but not enough to undo what steam has done. The door watcher makes a mark in the ledger that means scrubbed rather than only bathed. Later, oil may be offered, one drop for the temples, another for the joints, not required. Just a friendly sentence to end the chapter. Steam learns the room the way a cat learns a windowsill, arriving, circling once, settling exactly where warmth suits it. The Gibectari holds its temper radiant, even the kind of heat that does not ask the body to hurry. The Kurna basins along the wall keep their small conversations, a thin thread from the hot tap, a polite answer from the cool, the copper bowls resting on ledges like patient birds. The telek rinses the kismet in a basin, rings it with two slow turns, and hangs it on a hook where steam will soften it again between rounds. He tilts his own bowl, catching water from both taps until the mixture reads as right to his wrist. The next guest, a man with shoulders that have talked to rope and crate all week, sits on the warm step first. He lets the pextamo lie where it wants and watches the ceiling's small star vents breathe. When he nods, the telek leads him to the stone. A gentle aside, many baths keep time by the length of a mitt's patience and the rise and fall of foam, not by clocks. A round is as long as needed for skin to agree. The measure is the moment when the guest's breath goes from counting to forgetting to count. Foam returns like quiet weather. The attendant beats olive soap in a net bag with a quick, practiced whisk. Bubbles gather and become a cloud. He carries the cloud in both hands and rests it across the guest's back, then along the arms, then over the legs. The foam sighs as it settles. The mitt glides in long, straight lanes, then small circles at places that keep stories shoulder knots, the base of the spine, the arch of a foot. Here pressure is not force, it is a conversation between grain of skin and grain of mitt. At the nearest Kurna, an older visitor tends his own slow ritual. He warms the copper bowl twice, pouring first across his left shoulder, then the right, then tracing a line from crown to neck with a thin pour that avoids noise. He rinses the bowl before each refill, a courtesy to himself and to the next hand that might use it. When water spills, it finds the floor's shallow channels and follows them away, tidy as writing. Two friends share an alcove. Their voices stay at the level of folded towels. They trade the keys between them for places the other cannot reach, each asking with a tilt of the bowl rather than a sentence. When one pours, the other lifts his feet so water does not surprise the toes. Between them on the ledge sits a sprig of bay. The attendant left. Now and then they crush a leaf and breathe its green. A gentle aside, sharing a basin is a kind of grammar. Rinse the bowl before passing, pour close to the body, not across the floor. Keep the pextemo where modesty prefers it. Even when the stone has made you forget the street, the bath speech is made of such small agreements. Down the room, a boy who has just reached the age for the warm room comes in with his father at the slower hour. He stands on the step, sandals set neatly, watching the steam draw itself on the marble like chalk. The father shows him how to hold the bowl with both hands so heat does not lean too far forward, how to find the line between taps by feel, how to listen with the wrist. The boy pours for the father once, a careful braid of water over the shoulder. The father receives it as if it were tea. The telek invites the rope-shouldered guest to turn. He supports the movement with a forearm, the way a librarian closes a book without bending the page. Foam becomes polishing, then becomes water again as bowls arrive and leave with the rhythm of breath. A final pour sits at the back of the neck a heartbeat longer, then runs like a small river down the spine. The pextemo gathers the guest back into itself. Towels wait in the cool room, warm just enough not to surprise. Between rounds, the telek checks the stone with an old habit, palm flat, then the back of the hand. The Gibek Tawi answers steady. Where people have lain often, marble carries a faint sheen. It is not slipperiness, it is a history of soap and skin that now knows how to be a better surface. He sprinkles a bowl across the stone to lift any invisible soap line. The water races the channels in thin silver threads and disappears where clay pipes hum softly. In a corner niche, a jar of oil sits in warm water sesame, and a whisper of laurel, nothing that shouts. An attendant dips a fingertip and touches a temple here, a shoulder there, only if asked. Oil is the punctuation to steam's long sentence, not the paragraph. The guest from the stone chooses a drop for the knuckles that have met rope all week. He rubs it in as if smoothing rope itself. The door watcher marks the ledger with a small sign she uses for scrub done, tea taken. The page holds little else lines, notations, one or two names for accounts kept over many visits. A few tokens trade hands, one for entry, one for scrub, one for extra towels. They click on the tray with a sound like dry seed. Two travelers arrive quietly, led by someone who knew to come at this hour, when the bath belongs to steam more than to conversation. They learn quickly from the room how to behave, pextemel tied, sandals chosen, bowls accepted with a nod. One of them watches how another guest rinses the ledge before setting the bowl down and copies the movement without being told. The bath teaches by showing. A gentle aside, architecture works as attendant too. The doorways narrow you to a smaller step, the steps widen you to a longer breath. Domes gather sound and return it low. Basins at elbow height ask the body to bend correctly without saying so. A space made for water makes manners easy. Some guests rest on the warm step with towels wrapped high, letting sweat do a last, easy task. Others wash hair at the basins with a thin soap that pulls dust from scalp without borrowing all the oil from skin. An elderly man pours 7 bowls along the spine, then 7 across the chest, then sits quite still until the number becomes unimportant. Across from him, a young man with ink on his finger scribes scrubs his palms longer than everything else, watching the lines reappear as if the stone has revealed them again. The telek gives his mitt a rest and replaces it with another from the hook, one that has just learned steam. He thanks the used mitt with a rinse and a squeeze, like closing a small book with care. He folds towels the way bakers fold dough, corners meeting corners, edges lined to edges so the pile looks like thought made square. Foam bowl, mitt, towel, bowl, mitt, towel. The pattern holds the room. Tea arrives in the cool room, a glass placed at each bench end. Those finished with heat come to sit wrapped, backs leaning, eyes half closed. No one drinks quickly. A slice of lemon floats in a small bowl for whoever likes it. Another bowl holds a few pieces of candied peel, one each, not because of ration but because of taste. Sweetness speaks louder than steam if you let it. When the rope-shouldered guest leaves the stone, he walks with the gait of someone who has been told good news without words. He nods to the basin he used, as if it were a person who lent something. The telek and the attendant trade bowls, the way a kitchen trades ladles when a pot changes its mind. Heat continues its soft talk behind the wall. The kettles work as if they were in no hurry because they are not. By late morning the bath has learned everyone's pace. Steam keeps to its lanes like a gentle market, never crowding, never thin. The Gibbektari holds the kind of warmth that feels like the sun has been filtered through silk. Round the room, the Kurna basins continue their small, reliable talk spouts shaped like blossoms. Water arriving in threads that remember not to splash. This is the hour when the bath steadies. Those who came for the early scrub have finished the long sentences of foam and mitt. Those arriving now prefer the shorter phrases of rinsing and rest. A man with inclined fingers sits in an alcove and pours measured bowls, turning his wrists slowly as if showing the water to the lines in his hands. Nearby, a porter who has carried baskets all week lets the pekstemo sit high and cool while he leans against warm stone, eyes closed, the bowl balanced on a knee in a way that tells of practice. A gentle aside, the bath is not a race toward clean, it is a place where clean is the quiet consequence of staying long enough for sweat to do its tidy work. Long enough for muscles to admit they belong to bones without gripping them. Long enough for breathing to become uninteresting, to notice steady and kind. The telek moves like someone who trusts corners. He swaps a damp piece for a softened dry one, checks the stone with the back of his hand, and tiddies the ledge with a quick bowl so no soap lingers where a bare palm will rest. When he helps a guest stand, his arm becomes a railing that remembers to be warm. He does not hurry his own steps because the room teaches him that hurry is a kind of noise. Along the wall, the wooden sandals wait in pairs. A boy new to the warm room learns their clack is a language. Walk as if the floor is listening. He giggles once at his own echo, then remembers himself when the sound climbs the dome and returns as a soft bell. The father smiles without correction. The echo did the telling. At one basin, two friends share a last rinse. They keep their voices where towels live. One pours and the other lifts his feet. Then they trade places. Before they pass the bowl, each rinses it, a gesture small enough to miss and large enough to keep peace. They do not talk about work because steam asked for that favor at the door. They talk about the fig tree outside the gate and the way last night's wind made the courtyard smell like the beginning of rain. A gentle aside, baths keep secrets by design. Sound travels, but differently. Words arrive back to the speaker softened. Laughter returns as an exhale. Confession loses its sharp corners and becomes weather. Midway through the hour, a woman from the women's side, separate wings, separate doorways. Same language of water sends a note with the door watcher. Extra towels for a small child who did not plan to be brave about steam but decided to be. The attendant folds two thinner towels and slides them onto the tray with tea for that wing. The ledger receives a little mark no one needs to decode except the person who keeps such kindnesses in order. On the Gibbektari, heat eases a back that has memorized broom handles and ledgers alike. The telek does not scrub now. He presses palms along the spine as if closing a book without persuading any page to wrinkle. A bowl of water moves in slow commas, shoulders, neck, lower back. The guest inhales through the nose and lets the breath leave the way steam does without commentary. Across the room, an elderly man warms a copper bowl and holds it to his ear, a private habit. The hot metal sighs very faintly, a note only he hears. He smiles and pours over his crown, then sits to let water make its own puffs. He rubs his forearms with the open hand of someone who has known South plains and the weight of wood. The room holds his ears the way marble holds footprints without needing to show them. Under a small arch, the niche keeps a jug of cool water wrapped in damp cloth. The attendant touches the cloth, turns it a little so evaporation will continue its quiet work, and refills a clay cup for the guest who asked to cool his mouth before returning to warm stone. He drinks slowly, then presses the cup to his cheek for one heartbeat before setting it back with the care of returning a book to a shelf. A gentle aside, cool matters as much as warm here. Heat loosens, cool instructs. The passage between them is where calm lives. That is why the doorways narrow and widen. Why benches sit between basins and stone. Why towels wait where a body might think to stop rather than rush. Leaving, too, is an art. The rope-shouldered man finishes a final pour, then sits at the step between rooms. He waits with the towel around his shoulders until sweat becomes less a task and more a memory. He blots, not wipes, so skin will keep the little moisture that tells her how to be kind. He stands only when the thought occurs that standing would not disturb anything. In the cool room, benches have learned to hold many postures of contentment. Guests sit wrapped, hair damp at the edges, eyes half awake. Tea arrives again small glasses, pale amber. Someone places a slice of lemon in a bowl for those who want the mouth to remember sour before street. Another bowl of salt sits politely near sandals. A pinch on the tongue is an old habit, not for everyone, just for those who heat it after steam. The door watcher balances the ledger on her knee and adds tokens to a shallow dish. A few lines on the page mean entry only. A circle means scrub. A dot beside a line means asked for all. She does not need to look hard to remember faces. Baths grant many encounters with the same calm people at the same calm times. A traveler from a dry region learns the basin's language quickly. He stands too close to the tap once and finds warmth speaking too fast. The attendant tilts the bowl for him and smiles. Before long he is pouring with the same measured curve of wrist as those born near these stones. He notices how the channels in the floor keep his ankles dry even when water works busily, and he thinks without words that this is a room designed by someone who loved quiet. The telek cleans the gebek tawi between guests not with vigor but with method. A bowl across the center, two down the sides, one for each corner. He spreads a thin cloth and drags it with the flat of his hand so the surface feels newly blank. Heat remains without residue. He hangs the cloth to dry near a vent where warm air leaves as cloudlets the dome recycles. As guests drift to the cool room, a soft shuffle of sandals collects at the threshold. Each pair is set heel to wall again, toes out one of the few visible signs that people have been here as order improved. In a corner, a boy practices tying his pectoral without help. He gets it wrong once and laughs under his breath. His father pretends to be very interested in the pattern of the towel stripes until the knot appears properly. A gentle aside, the bath's lessons walk out the door underclothes how to ask without asking, how to attend to a shared thing as if it were one's own, how to let heat and cool alternate so the day does not feel like a single texture. People return to streets aligned differently than when they arrived, though nothing in their hands has changed. The middle hour closes itself politely. Steam lowers its shoulders a little. The kettle's breath slips from steady to steady quieter. The telek sits for a moment on the warm step, mid-resting on his knee, eyes on the small star vents that hold the ceiling like points in a map. He drinks water that has learned clay and sets the cup down with a care that says the next guest will deserve a whole cup, not a chipped one. Afternoon arrives as a gentler steam voices thin to threads, footsteps learn to float. The Gibektawi keeps an even warmth that feels like the inside of fresh bread set near Nanin. An oven's moth. Light from the small star vents has shifted. Its pattern travels slowly across marble, as if the dome were telling time with a soft hand. This is the hour for long rests and small attentions. An elder settles on the warm step with a folded towel behind the knees. An attendant brings oil warmed in a little bowl resting near a friendly pipe sesame touched with laurel, not loud. With two careful thumbs, he follows the map of the elder's joints. Little circles around the knuckles, longer lines along the forearm, a palm pressed briefly at the shoulder where weather sometimes speaks. The elder answers with breaths that forget to be noticed. A gentle aside. Oils here are punctuation, not paragraphs. A drop where a hinge complains, a line where a rope once lived in a palm, a whisper at the temple to remind breath to keep its slower pace. Grease is for gears, oil for remembering ease. At the basins, the quiet grammar of sharing continues. One guest warms a copper bowl, pours close to the skin, and then tips the bowl so the last thread of water returns to the kernel rather than the floor. Another rinses the ledge after soap, leaving it a blank page for the next hand. The pextemo stays where comfort prefers high, secure so modesty can keep breathing without supervision. The room teaches without saying. The telek moves with the patience that afternoon requires. He lifts a mitt that has learned steam again and tests it with his forearms, not his fingers. Skin there listens better for the right softness. He does not scrub much now. Instead, he uses the keys as a brush to suggest rather than insist a slow passes along the back, one broad sweep across the shoulders, then the bowl's warm agreement to smooth everything down. On the stone, foam appears like a small weather front, then dissolves the instant it has made its point. A traveler sits in a side alcove with head bowed, pouring bowls that begin warm and become merely pleasant. He watches a runnel carry water away with quiet purpose and thinks without needing words that the floor knows kindness. The channels never crowd the feet. The drains hum softly like bees working. Where flowers are invisible, the door watcher adjusts the ledger on her knee. Morning's marks lines and circles have settled into tidy meaning. She adds a duck beside an elder's line to note oil offered. Tokens on the tray click once as she sets them in their ridge dish. She does not look at the clock. The room keeps its own. In the furnace room, the stoker lowers the fire's voice by degrees, never all at once. A vent shutter opens the space width of a thumb. The flame accepts more air and less wood with equal politeness. Kettles keep their calm simmer enough to feed warmth for an hour yet, not enough to sharpen the steam. He hangs damp towels on a line near the warm wall where heat will dry them without turning them brittle. Mitts, rinsed and wrung, take their place along a beam like sleeping birds. A gentle aside, closing a bath is a slow conversation with heat. Fire learns to let go in steps. Stone carries the last sentences. Water ends the talk by returning to stillness. Anything faster would feel like rudeness to the day. In the warm room, sandals align themselves in neat pairs beneath ledges, heels to wall, toes outward. An attendant, half thinking, half listening, makes a small correction to a crooked strap. Order, like steam, prefers continuity. He passes a cloth along the gibektawi not to cool it, simply to clear any whisper of soap that light might have missed. The cloth travels in law marks. The stone answers by shining the way marble does when it remembers many hands. A young laborer arrives late. the kind of tired that makes even hot water feel like a story someone else is telling. The Telek invites him to sit on the step between rooms and offers to bowls poured slower than usual, first shoulder, then crown. After a quiet minute, the young man nods toward the stone. The Mit writes a few soft sentences across muscles that have been speaking too brightly. Foam appears and vanishes. A final bowl becomes a period. In a niche, a clay jug wrapped in damp cloth keeps water cool for mouths and for pressing to cheeks. A guest drinks and then rests the cup on his brow for a heartbeat. He returns the cup to its saucer with the careful sound that says the next hand matters as much as his own. Across the room, someone crushes a bay leaf and inhales the green. The scent moves to people over and becomes a shared thought without needing to be passed. The women's side, through its own corridors, lives the same oral low tide of voices, attendants setting aside extra thin towels for children who prove braver, mats being rinsed and hung like quiet flags to dry. A runner comes through the small door between wings with a tray for glasses of tea and a folded note that reads like a smile. The small one laughed at the foam. The Telek thanks the stone with a rinse after each back and checks the temperature with the back of his hand the way one greets a sleeping child. No surprise, only knowing. He folds towels so corners meet and edges agree, stacking them into a rectangle that looks like thought arranged itself. He sets aside 2 towels warm slightly near the wall for the last guests who will step from heat to cool with care. In the cool room, benches host the end of bath posture, shoulders lowered, towels like shawls, tea steaming gently. No one speaks about errands. They mention shade they might choose on the way home, bread still warm at the market, a patch of wind that follows one lane without understanding why. The ledger receives its final small marks for the hour. The door watcher counts tokens once, not twice. Trust is part of the building. A gentle aside. Leaving is a craft. Sit until sweat becomes quiet. Blot. Don't rub. Walk the short corridor with sandals that know how to keep silence from breaking. Outside, light will feel louder. Keeping the towel around the neck for 10 steps helps the street remember it is not required to rush. The stoker closes the wood store and leans what remains for tomorrow, the kindling at the front like a polite introduction, the thicker pieces behind like good company. He draws the damper a fraction more. The kettles sigh and keep their shoulders warm. He lifts the ash with a flat pan the way one might lift flour slow, not to wake dust, and carries it to its cool corner. Back in the haret, attendants begin the end-of-day tidying that does not disturb people still lingering. A bowl clears each ledge, a cloth persuades the corner rims to shine, wooden sandals are set in pairs, the floor's channels are guided with a wiper of soft reed, pushing thin rivers toward the drain so the stone can dry in even phrasing. Soap bars return to their chest, the cork finds the rose bottle and sits without complaint. The last scrub of the afternoon belongs to a craftsman whose hands smell faintly of cedar. He does not ask for much, only a mitt along the palms and a pour to the shoulders. The Telek obliges with the gravity of a small ceremony. Foam crosses skin, water closes it, and a towel arrives like punctuation. The craftsman nods at the basin, at the stone, at the man. Gratitude carries itself compactly when a room has taught ease. When the guests shift to the cool room for their parting tea, the Gebektari remains warm enough to remember them, but not so hot as to ask for anyone else. Steam gathers itself into smaller thoughts. The door watcher stands, smooths the ledger page, and lays the pencil across the crease like a bookmark for tomorrow. Late afternoon loosens its hand from the dung. Steam thins into threads that find the star vents and leave as small clouds. The Gibictari holds warmth like a memory rather than a task. Along the walls, the Kurna basins gleam a little darker where stone drinks what it was given. This is the hour of putting away done slowly. The Telek takes a bowl and rinses each ledge with the same care used for shoulders earlier, one long pour, a wipe that travels from corner to corner, then a pause so water can find the channels meant for it. He lifts each copper bowl to his eye level and turns it once. A thumb follows the curve looking for a place that might wish to be rubbed brighter. The bowls answer by reflecting a softened room. Sandals sit in lines that look like senses, pairs of quiet commas under each niche, heels to wall, toes outward. Towels stack into rectangles that make their own geometry. The attendant slides a palm across the top toe so the pile looks like thought settled. A gentle aside, order that the end of work is not fuss. It is a way of thanking tools, stone, and water for meeting you in the middle of the day and not asking questions. You set them right so they will recognize you tomorrow. In the furnace room, the stoker speaks last. He uses a flat pan to lift the day's ash the way flour is lifted slowly, so dust stays sleepy. The ash goes to its cool bin to wait for its next life as scouring for a different floor. He draws the damper fingers width toward closed. The flame accepts the suggestion. Kettles quiet themselves from simmer to warmth, a lid placed half over the most talkative mouth. Heat remains a kindness, not a command. Back in the warm room, mitts hang in a straight row along a beam, each rung just enough and smooth flat width to pull so the weave will dry honest. Soap bars return to their chest, lids nested, scents at peace. A cork finds the rose bottle. The cloth used to polish the Gibictari is rinsed, wrung, and laid near a vent where rising air will keep it modest company. The door watcher smooths the ledger page with her palm. Lines and circles have become meaning entries, scrub, tea, oil. She adds to small dots at the bottom for towels that traveled to the women's side and returned with the runner's tray. A stub of pencil marks the date on the next page, then lies across the crease like a bookmark for morning. Tokens clink once into a small cloth purse with a drawstring that knows it's not. Guests finish the art of leaving. A man sits on the step between warm and cool until sweat becomes only a thought of water. He blots with a towel, not rubs, so the skin's quiet can stay. He rises without shaking off the room, wraps his pec stemel high until the last moment, and swaps wooden sandals for street shoes with a careful exchange. Heel slides in, leather strap finds its place, foot thanks the floor with a soft step. Two friends trade a final bowl at the basin, then rinse the bowl and set it on its ledge, handle facing outward for the next hand. They pass under the arch and pause where the ceiling lowers. There they tie belts and smooth hair. Their voices are still on the bath's level, even while facing the street. A gentle aside, thresholds have manners. On the way in, they narrow you and lower your voice. On the way out, they widen you slowly so the day will not crowd your ribs all at once. In the cool room, tea makes its last circuit. Glasses return to the tray with a faint ring mark each. The attendant wipes the circles with a cloth that smells of nothing in particular. Someone chooses a piece of candied peel and lets it dissolve without chewing so sweetness will not shout beyond the door. Towels fold back onto the bench in small, grateful squares meant for laundering. The room's echo has grown hushed and round. The Telek walks the Harrowt one last time with the back of his hand extended, testing stone the way one greets a sleeping child. Open palm would wake it, back of hand only listens. Warmth answers steady but softened. He bows his head to no one in particular. He has thanked the stone already with water. Under an arch, a clay jug wrapped in damp cloth keeps its last cool for the staff. The door watcher pours a small cup for the stoker, who drinks it in the doorway of the furnace room where heat now speaks under its breath. They trade a few words not about wood or kettles, but about a breeze he felt at dawn that smelled faintly of figs. The bath keeps conversations this small and lets them pass like steam. A runner from the women's wing appears with a folded note. Child laughed at phone. Leaves asked to be returned next market day. The attendant smiles and tucks the note beneath the rose bottles tray. A sprig of bay left by a basin is crushed, breathed, and set on the ledge to dry. Tomorrow it will become a sweep across a towel stack. A gentle aside. Baths do not end, they pause. Night belongs to stone forgetting heat by degrees, water lying still, mats remembering how to be flat, and ledgers sleeping with their pages closed. Morning is only the other side of the same breath. One last guest, a carpenter with cedar on his sleeves, arrives too late for a full round and just in time for the bath's kindness. He sits on the step, the Telek pours to bowls slowly, shoulders crown. The carpenter stays until his face learns a softer line, then stands, bows a little to the basin, and leaves with a towel around his neck to keep the lane from feeling too sharp. The attendant lays the towel aside for washing with a gesture that says the day made room for him. The door watcher lifts the bar from its bracket and lowers it back into place, not to shut now, but to learn its weight before evening. She opens the door a handspan and lets the street's light try the threshold. The outside has a larger voice, but it arrives as a guest would hat in hand when the bath opens the door in this way. Floor channels receive a last guiding pass from a reed wiper. Thin rivers run to the drain that hums, then quiets. The corner rims are dried with a soft cloth, lit to wall. So dawn's first bowls will meet a dry. Polite edge sandals stand in their rows. Towels rest. Mitts breathe. Kettles glow under lids that look like closed eyes. The bathhouse breathes out. The dome keeps a final warmth to itself. The door watcher steps into the street and pulls the door nearly closed, leaving a thumb of cool between stone and wood so air can pass for a while. She hangs a small sign. That means nothing urgent, simply that the bath has become quiet. Outside, the lane receives people one by one as if they are returning to a book they laid down only for a page. Faces look rinsed of corners. Sandals step more softly even in shoes. Heat from the stone stays at the shoulders like a shawl no one else can see. If your breath has matched this closing wipe, hair lower, pour blot, and step let it remain slow. The room has returned the street to you the way a friend returns a borrowed bowl, clean, warm, and held with two hands. And as the bathhouse settles into evening and the kettles rest, we can walk toward a different glow, the long, steady light of a foundry where sand molds wait and bronze learns its voice. Let's slip into a low country's workshop, where an apprentice mines wax, clay and fire, and a town's future hours sleep inside a bell not yet cast. Before the first shutters lift in the square, a workshop at the edge of town stirs very quietly. The door opens on hinges that learned discretion a long time ago. A thin line of lamplight finds the packed earthen floor, the curve of a large wooden template leaning against a wall, and the round mouth of a casting pit that has been bricked and smoothed until it looks like a well that prefers warmth to water. An apprentice steps inward with the day in his hands, a pail of clean water, a cloth, and a small pot of tallow mixed with beeswax. He sets them down in order, then greets the room with the small habits that keep places like this: friendly shavings brushed into a neat pile, a bench wiped where dust left its overnight sentence. He checks the clock set high on a beam, not for time, but for company. Its slow tick sounds like a polite neighbor. The master will arrive later. Mornings begin with quiet tasks that belong to one pair of hands. The apprentice nudges last night's embers together and feeds them with small sticks. A brick stove along the wall prefers to learn heat slowly. He places a lidded pot near the gentlest flame inside it. The wax will soften without drama. Another pot warms water for hands and cloth. A low drawer opens to reveal letter shapes carved in pierwood fonts for inscriptions, copied in wax when the time is right. He touches the and the O with a fingertip, as if to reassure them they will be needed. A gentle aside, Bell bronze is mostly copper with a firm portion of tin. People speak of it as metal alone, but a bell is also time, air, and patience. The ringing begins long before any pour here. With bricks, clay, cloth, and a curved taut to loam, he lifts the heavy wooden template, the sweep board, into its stand at the pit's rim. Its edge is the bell's promise drawn in wood, the inner core profile on one side, the outer bell shape on the other. A pivot post rises from the pit center like a stake in a garden. The board fits onto this post and can revolve, tracing the future form in circles that leave marks more eloquent than words. The pit's core is a small landscape at the moment, yesterday's bricks laid in concentric courses, dome rising by quiet increments. The apprentice kneels to check joints, his knuckle tapping each brick in turn. The sound should be dry and confident. Where it is dull, he lifts the brick, smooths a broth of clay beneath, and resets it. The dome must ask gravity to be a helper, not a critic. From a shallow tub nearby, he tests the loam that will coat this brick shape. It is a mixture remembered by hands: river clay, sifted sand, chopped horsehair, and a little ash, each doing its small job. He wets a hand, presses loam into a ball, then lets it fall back into the tub. If it keeps its dignity but yields at the edges, it is ready. If it sulks and cracks, he adds water. If it slumps like porridge, a touch more sand. He hums while mixing. Rhythm returns even where clock faces have not yet learned numbers. He lays loam by hand across the bricks, handfuls pressed, then smooth, then pressed again. The wooden template turns slowly on the post, shaving away what is too proud, revealing the correct curve as a boat builder's plane reveals hull from timber. He works around the circle without haste. Where the board whispers, he listens. Where it scrapes, he answers with a wetted palm. Soon the core dome is a single thought, no seams, no arguments. A gentle aside, hair in the loam is not frivolous. It burns at baking and leaves tiny runnels, breathing puffs that let steam mind its temper when heat arrives. Without them, clay might remember to be stone at the wrong instant. He dusts the smooth core with charcoal, rubbed lightly from a cloth bag so the surface darkens to a gray that will mark his next step. Over this, he brushes a whisper of tallow. The charcoal shows where the board touches, The tallow prevents friendship between wax and loam from becoming attachment. The lidded pot at the stove has softened. Wax stirs like honey taught to be modest. He carries it to the bench and sets out a row of tiny iron tools, spatulas, loops, a worn spoon, and the tray of wooden letters. Today we'll lay the false bell, the wax thickness that defines the bell's skin. He begins not with words, but with a simple band. With a small ladle, he pours a ribbon of wax along the cord near the shoulder line, then draws it with a tool so it lies even. He turns the template a little and repeats, building a smooth coat, circle by circle. The chalk-darkened loam shows through where the layer is thin. He adds more where the board instructs. The result is not yet a bell, but its coat the space the metal will someday occupy. Letters come next. He warms a row of wax capitals between his palms until they flex without losing shape. On the bench, a narrow strip of waxed inscription ribbon waits like a path that wants company. He presses letters one by one into the strip, the town's name, the year, a short line that blesses calm weather and fair harvest. Each letter receives a touch of breath, and the gentlest pressure so edges meet without gap. The strip, now speaking, is lifted and measured around the false bell with a tailor's tape the master trusts more than any rule. He tacks it in place with pinches of softened wax, the letters reading level because the board has taught his eye what level looks like. A gentle aside, on some bells the words are prayers, on others the names of guild saints, or simple statements of who labored, sometimes a small relief wheat sheaf, star, or patron sign keeps the words company. Wax allows all of this to be discussed softly before. Fire makes the decision permanent. He turns to molding rings. At the shoulder and sound bow, he lays neat fillets rounded wax torus shapes that will become bold lines of bronze. With a strickle, a little profile scraper cut to a pleasing curve, he trues these bands so they read as firm geometry, not guesswork. He knows fingers will touch these lines, for as long as the town keeps it square, they should feel inevitable. The master arrives as a shadow becomes person in the doorway, bringing a cooler air and the smell of outside bread. He watches without comment while the apprentice composes another ribbon of letters, then nods toward the strike line, the place where clappers will later speak to metal. The apprentice bows his head and lays a slightly thicker wax there, patient as someone buttering bread for an elder. They walk the circle together, once board turning, eyes traveling. The master's finger pauses at one letter and presses a corner that stands a breath too proud. He touches the wax ridge near the mouth and draws a small curl away with a worn blade. His corrections are like turning a page straighter under a lamp. He says a single word, sound bow, and the apprentice attends to that curve as if it were a friend's request. A gentle aside, in some towns, tuning waits until after casting, when the bell is turned on a lathe and shaved by the smallest of measures. In others, the founder's ear and the template's honesty ask the mold to do more of the singing in advance. Either way, quiet accuracy now prevents loud persuasion later. The day warms by unremarkable degrees. Wax gains its coat. Letters learn their places. Fillets become certain. The pit smells faintly of charcoal and loam. The stove clicks softly, pleased with its temper. On a shelf, crucibles look outward like resting birds. In a corner, sacks of tin and copper wait behind a board a polite distance from the morning's work. Metals not yet asked to mingle. They stop to take a drink from a clay cup and share a heel of bread. The master's hands hold the cup, As if it were still warm from firing, the apprentice's hands smell of beeswax and damp earth. No one hurries their chewing. Outside, the square tries a bell of its own, small handheld brass at a stall announcing fruit, but it is ordinary sound, not the note that will one day walk the lanes at noon. Before stopping, they mark the false bell lightly with a small, hidden sign inside the rim to fine lines with a dot between. It is not a signature for show, only a memory for the chest that will keep today's drawings. The workshop keeps its slow temperature. Wax has found its place's letters speaking politely. Fillets true, the striked line a shade fuller. Now the bell must gain its second skin, the outer mold, often called the mantle, so that a hollow will exist where bronze can later live. The apprentice carries a shallow tub of fresh loam to the pit, river clay sifted finer, sand a little sharper, horsehair chopped shorter than before, and a modest pinch of ash. Beside it he sets torn linen strips and a basket of thin jute cloth. These will become the mantling layers, each one teaching the next how to lie con. He wets the core's surface lightly, just enough for dust to nod, and brushes away anything that might wish to become a crack later. The master rolls the sweep board to its outer profile. The board's new edge now draws the promise of the bell's outside face. He turns it once slowly to remind the room of the line. The apprentice rubs the false bell with a cloth, carrying a whisper of towel. Not much letters and fillets should release from clay the way a hand releases from water. A gentle aside. Mantles live by patience. Each layer must be thin, honest, and allowed time to think, to wet and it slumps, to dry and it sulks into cracks. The founder's real tool here is not the board, it is the willingness to wait for air to do its part. They begin with a scratch coat. The apprentice lays loam by hand from shoulder down toward the mouth, pressing with fingertips so it keys into every curve around letters and lines. The master follows with the board, turning it in small arcs that shave away pride and leave a thickness like the breadth of a fingernail. Linen strips arrive next, floated onto the damp loam and smooth with the palm heel so no wrinkle hides beneath. Another whisper of loam seals the cloth. The board turns again. The circle continues, loam, cloth, loam, until a first shell exists, modest even. At intervals, they stop to dress breath, small vents no bigger than a straw are made with a sliver of reed near high points where steam will later wish to gather round the crown. The master presses 3 short reeds outward that will become little chimneys, air must leave. Without argument, he says softly, more to the mantle than to the apprentice. Near the pit's rim stand iron hoops with ears, mantle rings. When the first shell has learned to stand, they bid a hoop into a fresh layer of loam about a hand's breadth above the shoulder. The ears will later accept lifting bars so that many hands become one when the time comes to move weight. A second hoop sits higher still. Between hoops, jute cloth strengthens the curve without asking to be seen. They work in quarters of the circle, never chasing wet into wet. The apprentice marks where he stops with a thumbnail line and resumes only when the loam returns a gentle cool to the back of his hand. The stove's low warmth helps, but does not hurry. To small braziers placed at a respectful distance spread comfort through the air, not heat against the mold. A gentle aside. Dung is sometimes added to loam, not as a joke but as a truth. Its fine fiber and small salts temper shrinkage and help fire pass. Here the horsehair does most of that quiet work. And a pinch of ash persuades the mix to dry evenly. Foundry recipes are family stories written in handfuls. Layer by layer the mantle grows to a thickness that knows its job stout enough to hold bronze, not so heavy as to forget breath. The board's edge rides like a reliable star. Where it whispers, the apprentice listens and adds. Where it scolds, he scrapes and smooths. Letters, once proud in wax, are now buried but not forgotten. Their shapes press themselves into the mantle's inner face like the memory of a sentence behind a page. When the outer surface reaches the chalk line the master drew on the post yesterday, they pause. He runs a caliper, a simple wooden gauge, across 3 checkpoints and hums approval. At the crown, a round iron button, the cannon's future seat, is impressed into the wet loam to mark where hanging irons will later meet the finished bell. Today it is only a reminder circle. Metal will take its true geometry later. They set the braziers a little nearer and open the shop door to a hand's breadth. The mantle must move from damp to dry to hard by degrees. The apprentice trims the vent reeds so their mouths protrude modestly. He writes today's date with the tip of a stick on a patch of loam high on the mantle, only to anchor memory. For a long hour, they leave the mold to think. The master uses that hour to prepare the gating, the paths by which metal will enter and air will depart willingly. He sketches on a slate a central pouring cone above the crown, the sprue short runners to feed the shoulder and the sound bow, small risers to keep metal topping itself as it shrinks. Metal is a guest, he says in a voice that could belong to the stove. Give it a clean door and a place to sit. When the mantle's outer skin has lost surface shine, they return with slender wooden tools and carve the spruce seat at the crown, a shallow, neat crater into which a baked clay funnel will later nest. 2 runners no wider than a thumb are formed along the mantle's flank with a steady hand, arching downward to meet the fattest parts of the bell's future body. Near each runner's end, the master pricks a vent path that climbs toward one of the little chimneys. Feed and brief, he murmurs. Always both. A gentle aside, some founders set iron nails, registers, through mantle into false bell at exact points to measure thickness when wax is gone, drawn back after casting. Their shanks tell how honest the hollow became. Others trust ears and boards. Here, the master uses both a few registers set lightly, a board that has learned truth. Now the mantle must part from the work beneath, but not yet. First baking. They bank the braziers and light to more, bringing warmth into the pit like a slow sunrise. The apprentice sits with a hand on the mantle now and then, feeling heat climb. It should never sting, it should persuade. A faint sweet scent of hair and loam tells him the breathing paths are opening. Wax within softens further, losing the hard edge that allows a clean lift later. When the master judges the moment with the back of his knuckles, they prepare to raise. Lifting bars slide through the hoop ears to neighbors, long used to such calls, step through the door and take places at the ends. The master scores the mantle's foot with a thin blade to free it from the pit's floor bond. Quietly he says, though no one was ready to be noisy. On a breath they lift 1 inch, then 2. The mantle rises like bread released from a good pan. Wax letters, fillets, and the false bell's smoothness show themselves for a last, calm heartbeat, then rest again on the core as the mantle is carried to a cradle beside the pit. The apprentice inhales, surprised to see the false bell naked again. It looks almost mischievous without its cloak. The master smiles the way older men smile when a task has crossed its middle. Now we ask Wax to step aside. They warm the false bell gently with a charcoal pan passed at a distance never closer than an arm. Drops begin to form at the lowest rim and fall like beads of honey into a shallow tray. Letters soften at their edges and slide with dignity. Bands blur, then vanish. The apprentice guides the flow with a wooden spatula, never scraping, only suggesting. He works around the circle 3 times, whispering to himself the way one whispers to a horse that already knows the path. A gentle aside, the wax that leaves is not discarded. It returns to the lidded pot, learns to be stripped, and letter again on another day carrying a ghost of prayers and dates within it. Workshops waste little, even the warm smell becomes a memory used to judge enough. When all wax has stepped away and the core shows its charcoal dark, tallow-sheen skin, they brush the surface with a soft reed broom to clear inkling. The apprentice touches the striped line with the pad of his finger. It is only loam now, but the thickness there remains a little fuller, as intended. They lower the mantle back over the core, aligning small chalk marks the master had placed in advance, one near a carved star, one beside a vent. The fit is close, like 2 pages brought edge to edge. The registers slip back into their holes to ensure nothing has forgotten where to sit. Around the foot, they trowel a neat joint of fresh loam pressed inward, smooth outward, as much sealing as greeting. The braziers resume their slow talk. The mantle and core now a true mold with a purposeful hollow must bake as one until dryness runs through them like a thought that has become decision. The vents sip air with the soft, ticking patience of cooling bread. Morning's quiet returns with a different warmth. The pit has baked enough to keep its own counsel. Vents breathe like sleeping reeds. The stove's small fire becomes a real flame in the furnace mouth. Bricks that were only warm learn to glow along their edges. From a shelf the master brings 2 sacks, one heavy with copper cakes the color of old sunsets, the other with tin ingots pale as folded moon. He sets them down side by side as if introducing guests who will soon be kin. The apprentice sweeps the furnace hearth, lays a dry bit of charcoal, and opens the flue so air will travel clean. A crucible that's outside, chalked with last year's notes, rests on a ring of fire brick. It looks like a pot that already knows how to be patient. A gentle aside, Bell bronze is often copper with a firm share of tin for parts in 5 copper, 1 in 5 tin, with small wanderings by air and tradition. Copper lends body, tin lends brightness. The exactness matters, but so does the pace at which they meet. Copper goes in first, cakes nest inside the crucible like river stones in a bowl. The apprentice lays thin charcoal between them, a lid of night to keep air from borrowing too much metal as it wakes. The furnace swallows the pot. Heat closes around it with slow approval. A bar across the mouth controls breath. A low growl of flame answers each small change. While the copper learns red, all tools learn warm. Skimmers rest near the fire. The pouring shank leans where heat can loosen metal's eventual weight. Clay funnels and runners set aside yesterday are baked again to dryness. No water is welcome near. Bright metal? The apprentice carries a ladle to the pit and lays it across 2 bricks above the crown so it will not surprise bronze later with a cold touch. He checks the mantle's vents with a sliver of reed. Air pulls at it politely. He smiles and leaves the reed like a little flag for steam to greet when the time comes. At the bench, the master weighs tin on a balance with pans, moving small pellets until the pointer forgets which side it prefers. He wraps the share in clean cloth. Tin will not meet the fire early. It will arrive when copper is already saying yes. A gentle aside, Tin is a courteous guest but quick to travel away in too much flame. Founders tuck it under the surface when copper is ready, ask charcoal to cover it, and stir only enough to make family, not argument. The furnace deepens in color, from bread crust to cherry to a red that carries orange inside it. Copper edges round, surfaces sink as corners soften. When the master draws the lid with the hook, a breath of light leans outward like a cat from a door. He skins the crucible's top with a long-handled spoon, lifting dross that looks like a story ending and setting it aside on a brick to cool. Tin arrives, the cloth parcel opens, pale metal slips into red, disappearing at once. The master stirs with a graphite rod not much thicker than a thumb, turning the melt with a slow spiral. The apprentice sprinkles powdered charcoal across the crucible's mouth. Black becomes a quiet lid that keeps the ear's appetite modest, together. They watch metal find itself, no hurry, no talk. Around the pit, the last arrangements happen without being told. The clay pouring funnel nests in the spruce seat. The apprentice presses its lip with 2 fingers to test fit, then seals its foot with a ring of soft loam smooth toward the opening so bronze will see only one path. Riser mouths receive baked clay cups that will show the top of the metal's thought when the hollow is full. The floor near the pit is swept. A final time. Dust prefers to watch from a distance. A gentle aside. Pouring is not a show, it is a quiet walk from heat to hollow. Weight is the sentence, gravity does the grammar, hand and eye make the punctuation. Every gesture slows the next thing that might trip. The crucible says it is ready in 3 languages. Color gold within red, surface a skin that opens the instant the rod draws a line, sound a lower note when the rod clicks the wall. The master nods. They close the furnace a fraction to hold heat in reserve and slide the lifting tongs under the crucible's shoulder lugs. To neighbors step in, as arranged. With a count they lift, knees say yes, back stay honest. The pot clears the mouth and rests into the pouring shank's ring. The ring closes with a pin. The world seems to lean its head to watch, but nothing in the room makes noise about it. They walk the bright distance. Bronze's lip shows under its charcoal veil where the shank tilts slightly. It is the color of someone remembering a lantern. At the pit, the master turns the shank by small degrees. The first thread of metal finds the clay funnel and goes down singing so softly it could be breath. The apprentice watches the riser cups. He calls present when the first mirror lifts in one, then the other. The master holds the pour a heartbeat longer until both risers swell and dome. Then he levels the shank. Bronze remains in the crucible. The funnel drinks the last polite swallow, then clears its throat with a small bright cough. Silence returns, a little warmer. A gentle aside. The first thread of a pour carries the rune's hope and the mole's truth. If vents answer, if risers rise, if nothing hisses like a fox in a coop, the rest is only finishing the sentence you have already begun. Wow. They step back and place the shank on its cradle. Dross left in the crucible skins over. A skimmer draws it aside into a brick hollow. The apprentice looks only once at the funnel's mouth to be sure a small meniscus sits there like glass, then he leaves it be. Touching now would be asking for a lesson no one wants. Heat in the pit teaches air above it to move. The vent reeds quiver once and are done. The mantle's skin darkens by a shade, small lines gloss, then matte. The riser cups think the width of a barley grain as bronze forgets to be as big as he had made it. The master rests a palm on the pit's rim not to measure anything useful, only to remind his hand that work has moved from doing to waiting. They set a board across the pit mouth as a courteous roof, then another leaving gaps at the edges for breath. A handful of dry sand rides onto the boards to hold them steady. The apprentice writes a small mark in the loam at the joint where mantle meets floor, a straight line and a dot poured at the third hour. Not for anyone else, only for the next hour's patience. The crucible returns to the furnace for a moment's warmth. Metal still inside will become scraps and small castings, later bolts for cannons, perhaps a clapper's shank. For now, it is covered and left to glow. The neighbors nod and step away the way men do who have held weight and are glad to set it down without making a hymn of it. A gentle aside, cooling is half the casting. Metal hardens more than once, the first time into shape, the second into voice. Hurrying the second makes the first regret itself. They clean around what they cannot touch. The skimmers are scraped, rods wipe, with a cloth that has known soot for years. Tongues return to their pegs. The apprentice tips the dross cake from the brick hollow and turns it with a stick, reading the shine inside it for hints of what the melt decided to keep or let go. He will not say anything about it. He will remember it the next time weights are counted. By mid-afternoon, the furnace's door draws closer. The master lowers the damper a breadth of fun. Heat agrees to become memory. The pit's boards keep their small roof. The riser cups have cooled to a color between copper penny and bread crust. No one tests them. They are allowed to keep their quiet. They sit on low stools, share the last of the morning's bread, and drink water that remembers the clay it lived in. The apprentice's hands smell of charcoal and warm metal, the master's smell of loam and the linen that held tin. They speak little, ears do most of the praise. Later, before the light leans toward evening, the master stands and brushes a little ash from the mantle's shoulder with the back of his fingers. He nods to the ledger on the shelf. The apprentice writes a single line poured. Vince answered and closes the book. By the time shadows shorten to quiet, the pit's warmth has learned stillness. The boards that made a small roof sit calm. A scatter of sand keeps them honest. The master rests the back of his hand on a board the gentlest thermometer and nods. Heat remains, but it is the kind that agrees to be disturbed. They clear the sand with palm sweeps that make no sound worth echoing. Boards rise one by one and lean against a wall where wood remembers earlier days. The riser cups look like small, cooled moons, dull, steady. The clay funnel keeps its posture. No metal has crept where it wasn't invited. The apprentice smiles without showing teeth and fetches tools that open the day carefully. A fine blade, a wooden wedge, a mallet that knows how not to be loud. A gentle aside, revealing a casting is part archaeology, part housekeeping. Loan breaks if you ask politely. Stone, brick, and patience or your friends. Anything sharper than necessary is a guest, not a host. At the mantle's foot, the master scores the joint where fresh loam sealed mold to floor yesterday. The blade makes a line like a new crease in paper. He sets two wooden wedges there. The apprentice taps them in alternating measure left, then right, each time no more than a small persuasion. The mantle answers with a sigh that could belong to bread leaving a pan. A line shows itself around the foot, first a thread, then a ribbon. The lifting bars slide through the hoop ears once more. The neighbors arrive by habit and take their places. When the master's eyes agree with the mantle's, he says now like a blessing. They raise together, an inch, then two, the clay shell rising straight and slow. Dust remembers to stay down. The apprentice watches the joint where clay leaves clay, looking for any wish to follow. None appears. The mantle clears the crown and swings to its cradle. The pit breathes. Inside, the bronze sits as if it has always been there. A layer of fine, pinkish loam still clings. The sprue cone at the crown and two riser stems look like small trees growing from a hill. The sound bow rests solid and round. The apprentice puts a hand to the pit's rim again, not on the metal, not yet, and finds his shoulders forget a small worry they were holding. They step down onto the bricks and work close. The clay around the bell's base is tapped with the mallet's wooden head until it reforms into handfuls. The apprentice lifts pieces to a basket lined with a worn cloth. Loam that has known fire will find water tomorrow and become useful again. Round the waist, he brushes with a reed broom, clouds of friendly dust rising, and then remembering the floor. A gentle aside. The smell right now is particular warm clay, a faint metal tan, and the ghost of horsehair turned to sweet ash. People who work here count the day by scent as much as by clocks. The funnel breaks free with a tidy twist and a lift, leaving the sprue's bright stump at the crown. The riser stems are sawn short with a hacksaw whose teeth have learned to be patient. Each cut makes a note like a deep, sleepy cricket. Stubs remain, they will go later, under a careful file. For now, gravity will help keep the bell polite when lifted. The cannons, the thick arms that will one day hold the bell to its headstock, show their beginnings faintly, still caked in loam. The master brushes them with a whisk until their good shape admits daylight. He feels along each protruth of thickness with a thumb and forefinger. They tell him what he expected. He nods to the mold he cannot thank because it has become itself. A lifting chain waits on a stout beam. They pass a broad sling under the bell at the sound bow, making sure cloth sits between bronze and strap so no scratch writes itself on the first day. The neighbors steady the pitch. On a slow breath the bell rises from the pit, bronze saying nothing louder than the chain's small clicks. It swings to a bed of straw laid on boards. The apprentice lowers it with both hands, as if setting a child into sleep. Loam inside the bell shows like a dark dome. The crown is still closed by the spruce stump, so they begin from beneath. With the wooden mallet and a rounded stick, the apprentice invites the core to crumble careful taps that move from mouth to waist to shoulder. Clay yields where hair left breathing paths. A pan catches what falls. A larger chunk lets go and slides with a soft thump. Dust lifts and settles on the straw like new powder. He works by circles until his hand can reach up and brush the inside with a reed broom. The surface there is sandy smooth, like bread crust where a cloth laid during baking. A gentle aside, leaving the sneer of loam inside, can dampen the first notes and spare yours a raw edge. Finishing happens in hours and days, not in one sweep. Founders let bronze remember warmth while it learns air. The master trims the sprue at the crown to a neat boss with a hacksaw, then a file. The riser scars receive the same attention, each stroke even, each pause for breath synchronized with the tool's weight. He does not aim for shine, he aims for honesty. The apprentice gathers the sprue and riser pieces into a bucket labeled with chalk. Tomorrow they will become the clapper's bolt and a handful of small, necessary fittings, metal remembering itself as life continues. They roll the bell onto a padded cradle. The master takes a piece of chalk and touches the waste in for places, then two more, ranging in invisible geometry older than any of them. With a felt-covered hammer tuning mallet that does not bite, he taps near one chalk mark. The bell answers with a shy hum. No more. He taps again higher on the waist. The sound grows longer but stays modest. Good, he says, not about beauty, but about promise. He does not strike hard. There is no ringing today, only the first whisper that tells the mold kept faith. In the corner, a basin holds hot water and a brush with bristles trimmed blunt. The apprentice wets the brush and passes it lightly over letters now revealed: town name, year, the quiet sentence about harvest and calm weather. Wax had written them with breath, bronze keeps them with gravity. He wipes, rinses, wipes, never scrubbing, always inviting. A little soot stays in the depths of each letter, darkening them the way ink deepens carved wood. The eye reads easily, the hand rests on the band and finds the truth of its curve. They turn the bow once more to check the cannons from below. The master fits a simple wooden beam through them, temporary, sized by habit, and lifts a finger beneath, asking the bell to share its weight with wood. It does so without complaint. He smiles, lines near his eyes making their own small map. A gentle aside, some founders sing to new bells. Not songs with words, tones long and low, so the metal learns it is allowed to answer gently. Others prefer quiet, letting the bell collect the room before offering anything back. Either way, volume is never part of birth here. Late light comes through the high window and finds the bronze where loam has been brushed thin. The surface shows color that is not yet the brown of age nor the bright of polish, something in between, like the inside of a chest that has seen linen for years. The apprentice strokes the waist with the back of his fingers. The temperature speaks of patience still required. He leaves handprints that mean nothing and everything. They carry the bell a little farther into the room and set it on a frame where wheels can later lift it to the tuning place, a simple lathe bench made of oak and certainty. Not today. The bell will cool its own way until morning. A cloth covers the crown. Not for modesty, but to keep dust from taking liberties. The pit is tiddied with a wiper of reed and a shovel used like a spoon. Loam returns to tubs. Bricks along the rim find their straight line again. The mantel have zatter, and the ring shell are stacked like careful bowls to one side, each brushed once with a soft broom so tomorrow's hands will not meet yesterday's grit. On the bench, the apprentice writes a line in the ledger. Opened, bronze true, letters clean, first hum answered. He closes the book with two hands, as if trapping a butterfly that will be set free tomorrow. Morning returns as a cool hand. Bronze has forgotten the heat enough to enjoy touch. The bell waits on its oak cradle. A cloth keeps dust from presuming. The master folds the cloth aside as someone might lift a page in a favored book. The room answers with the small comfort of tools laid out in order, files with chalk teeth, scrapers with edges like careful snow, a felt mallet, oil, a length of fine emery, a pot of lamblack, and linseed. They begin with what eyes can correct. Riser scars already trimmed receive time from a smooth file. The master draws each stroke one way only, never sewing, letting the tool sing its little metal song. The apprentice follows with emery wrapped around a cork, easing the marks until light no longer catches on them with an opinion. He does not seek shine. He seeks the look of a surface that has decided itself. A gentle aside. Finishing is not to make a bell handsome. It is to remove anything that might speak out of turn, A ridge can add a whisper no one asked for. A scratch can sharpen a note in a place where roundness is kinder. Inside the waist, the apprentice checks for crumbs of cologne that forgot to depart. With a reed broom and a soft brush, he sends them to a pan. A damp cloth barely gathers the last dust, leaving a thin film that keeps the first tests gentle. The master rubs a breath of oil along the inscription band so letters darken by the smallest degree. Words learn legibility without glare. They roll the bell to the simple tuning bench. Today will not be a full shaving on a great lathe. That work belongs to later, elsewhere, with measure sticks and notes held to the air. Here, the master attends only to the honest beginning's small scrapes at the sound bow of the first hum asks. He sets chalk marks again around the waist, lower this time, then takes the felt mallet and taps, as if greeting an old friend in the street without stopping in. A hum steps forward, quiet, round, longer than yesterday. He taps a hand's breadth higher, a brighter answer leans in, then withdraws politely. He listens for what lies under both the bell's broad body, the overtone that will become its name to the square. His ear has learned to sort these like threads. He nods once, then chalks a thin ring at the thickest part of the sound bow. With a curved scraper he kisses that ring one pass, then another, each thin as the peel a cook would take from an apple to show skill without show. After 3, he taps again. The hum lengthens by a heart's beat. He stops. Enough for birth, he says. Which is how this workshop defines success on a first morning. On a bench nearby lies the clapper wrought piece, not yet leathered, with a shank that will meet the bell's crown by bolt and conscience. The apprentice carries it to the hot water basin, wets a strap of tough hide, and wraps the clapper's striking face twice. He ties it with a thong that has already remembered this knot from other mornings. Leather softens the greeting two bodies give each other when they are newly introduced. They mount the bell on a temporary yoke through the cannon's oak plane smooth, edges eased, auger holes true. A bolt passes through the clapper loop, a washer and a pin close the arrangement without asking it to be permanent. Two neighbors step in again, and with a slow lift the bell rises within the frame. It swings once on purpose, forward, back, then still. The clapper hangs where gravity teaches courtesy. A gentle aside. First striking is a whisper, not a proclamation. The room is asked to keep company, not opinion. A felt mallet speaks for questions. Leather answers for the bell. The master steadies the lip with one palm and draws the clapper lightly inward with the other, then lets it return from the smallest distance. A sound arrives like warm bread broken round, friendly, no sharp edges. He does it again, a finger's width farther. The room holds its breath in a way that is instinct rather than rule. Even the furnace mouth looks thoughtful, though its fire is out. The bell answers easily, as if admitting it knows why it was made. The apprentice's shoulders set down in old, small worry. They try not more than 6 such touches. Between each, the master listens to the way the note leaves the bronze, meets the timber of the yoke, speaks to the ear, and then goes to the bricks. Nothing rattles. Nothing sulks. He presses a thumb where the clapper's leather has begun to find its seat. The mark is centered. A nod settles the moment. Next, the crown. The sprue boss becomes a neat plateau for the iron crown plate that will one day meet a headstock in a tower. The apprentice rubs a little lamblack and oil under the plate, presses it to the bronze, and lifts. The print reveals a high place. The file offers 3 patient strokes. The print returns even. Holes are marked with a pricker, and all begins each gently. Enough for the smith, the master says, the final marriage of bolt and beam will happen near the stair that meets the sky. They dress the surface with a cloth, and a breath of oil, not polish, only a promise against damp. Letters receive a soft brush so that every stroke reads as if written this morning. The town name holds itself level. The year looks newly minted. The small sentence about weather and harvest sits where a hand might choose to rest on market days. A cart with quiet wheels arrives at the door, a bed of planks sprung with rope, a horse that has pretended to understand bells before. The master declines any display. The neighbors help lift. Straw receives the weight. Folds of canvas keep dust from introducing itself along the lanes. Two wedges kiss the sound, though, to prevent wandering. The rope through the yoke finds the cart's rings and makes their acquaintance. The horse blows once, as if agreeing that noon will be a good idea. A gentle aside. Moving a bell is a lesson. In-house streets prefer to be treated slow at corners, slower where children point, slowest where cobbles think about being uneven. A bell on a cart is a kind of speech already. You let it be a murmur. They travel only as far as the yard where the tower's stair begins. Other hands and pulleys will make the height. Today the bell earns sunlight without smoke. Pigeons blink from the eaves. A boy with a loaf in a cloth stops without meaning to, and then goes on, feeling as if someone had said his name kindly. Back in the workshop, the pit is swept to the neatness that tells tomorrow he's welcome. Loam returns to its tubs with water dribbled in it until it remembers to be workable. Bits of yesterday's kind file, scraper, broom are hung on their pegs. The ledger opens. The apprentice writes carefully, finished to first voice, clapper set to tower yard. He adds a tiny mark he has used since the first day he dared 2 lines, and a dot at the margin for promised kept. The master sits a moment with his hand on the bench. He does not speak a blessing aloud. The room has heard enough this morning. He only rests his palm there until warmth agrees with wood. Then he stands, folds the cloth over the tools, and sets the lamp's wick lower. Outside, the town's smaller bells make their ordinary statements: shop door, school, a tea vendor who likes brass. Soon, another voice will join. It will not be loud for loudness' sake. It will mark noon as a courtesy and fold the hours the way a baker folds dough. Turn, rest. Turn again. People will say, it's time, and mean nothing urgent, only truthful. If your breathing has moved with these last attentions, file, tap, listen, strap, lift, and cover, let it stay slow. These for quiet trades, lanterns at night, bred by water, steam taught to be kind. And bronze learning its name will go on speaking under your sleep.